Good morning, Dr. Ruiz. Can you turn your camera on and count to 5 for me, please?
Hey, I'm setting it up for him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Are the meeting platform hosts ready to begin?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready to begin the hearing? Please provide a 5-second countdown.
Start again. Good morning. I call this hearing to order. A quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Before we proceed, I'd like to go over some items for our hybrid hearing. First, if you are experiencing connectivity issues, please make sure you or your staff contact our designated technical support so those issues can be resolved immediately. Members participating remotely must continue to remain visible on camera for the duration of their participation in the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. It is committee policy that members participating remotely will remain muted when not recognized, just like turning your microphone on and off during an in-person hearing. This is out of courtesy to all members on the committee and so that background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. When you are recognized, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for 2 or 3 seconds before speaking so that your words are captured on the live stream. If you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and have your staff email the document to veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded to the committee document repository. Without objection, members will be recognized in order of seniority for questioning witnesses today. This will make it easier for me to ensure all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. Does any member have a question about the procedures for this hearing? Seeing none, we will move forward. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. It is an honor to join all the members of the House and Senate committees on Veterans Affairs, virtual and in person, to hear directly from our veteran service organizations. This is our third and final hearing this year to hear testimony from the VSOs, which is invaluable as we work to support our nation's veterans. During today's first panel, we will hear from the American Legion commander and as well as other leaders from the Legion. For our second panel, we will hear from representatives of 7 additional VSOs, including Paralyzed Veterans of America, Student Veterans of America, Military Officers Association of America, Gold Star Wives of America, National Guard Association of the United States, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, Modern Military Association of America, the American Defenders of Bataan and Caregivers Memorial Society will also be recognized. Welcome, everyone, and I would like to welcome all of the VSO members and supporters who have joined us online today as well. The opportunity to hear from our Veteran Service Organization partners is incredibly important to me, and I'm grateful you all could participate today. This is a very exciting and busy month. Last week, the House debated and passed the critically important Honoring Our Pact Act. I want to personally thank the VSO community for the tremendous support you have provided during this successful legislative process. The work is not over, but I was encouraged to see 42 VSOs send a very strong letter to the House leadership supporting the PACT Act, and with your help, I know we can get this done. I'd also like to express my thanks to Senator Tester for his continued efforts to work with me to pass comprehensive legislation to address toxic exposure in the Senate. Our bipartisan Honoring Our Pact Act finally provides much-needed access to VA health care and disability benefits to over 3.5 million veterans exposed to toxic substances. It requires that VA presumes veterans who were exposed to toxic substances rather than placing the burden on veterans to prove this link themselves. And critically, it reforms VA's presumption decision-making process so Congress doesn't have to keep intervening. Vietnam veterans waited for more than 40 years for benefits related to Agent Orange exposure because of Congress's piecemeal solutions. Toxic exposed veterans have held up their part of the pact, and they deserve our action. Last week, the House kept its promise to these veterans, and I look forward to continuing to work with the Senate to make this law. In the last Congress, we secured several important wins for our veterans with the help of our VSOs, including passing the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, the Deborah Sampson Act, and the Veterans Compact Act, and the Commander Scott Hannon Act. I'm very proud of these accomplishments, but they are only the beginning. We need to build on these achievements together and continue our fight for better health care and benefits in this Congress and beyond. Reading today's testimony, it is clear that VSO priorities greatly align with my own. My committee's top priorities for this Congress include creating a more inclusive and welcoming VA, building equity for an increasingly diverse veteran community, reducing veteran suicide, addressing toxic exposure, ensuring student veterans receive quality education, advocating for women veterans, modernizing VA, supporting VA's long-term care facilities, improving VA's management and oversight, and ensuring our legislative accomplishments are implemented effectively. Our diverse veteran community includes higher numbers of women, LGBTQ+, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native veterans than ever before. It is our country's diversity that strengthens our armed forces and veteran communities, and minority veterans deserve to feel safe and welcome when they enter through its doors, with outreach, programming, and solutions that address their unique needs. Additionally, VA must acknowledge the diversity of its workforce to address systemic discrimination in the workplace. We must ensure that health care and benefits are fairly and equitably distributed to all eligible veterans, and to do that, we must also ensure a safe and equitable workplace for VA employees. Our work to prevent veteran suicide continues. We must relentlessly pursue well-researched and scientifically sound policies that are proven to prevent suicide. We have big goals, but I know that with your support and insight here today, along with the support of the administration, we will be able to deliver on them and fulfill the promises we've made to our nation's veterans. I look forward to today's hearing, to hearing today's testimony, and thank you all for your continued advocacy and support for our veteran community. Chairman Tester, I now recognize you for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. I want to welcome all 9 VSOs that are here today with a special welcome to the American Legion as you were up first. Commander Dillard, thank you for being here today, and I want to thank your advocacy on behalf of our nation's veterans and their families. I also want to congratulate Chairman Takano and the entire House for passing the Honoring Our Pact Act. That was incredibly impressive. Simply put, our job is to do absolutely everything in our power to ensure veterans are connected to the care, the benefits, and the service they deserve in a timely manner. VA was facing staff shortages prior to COVID-19, and those have only gotten worse. We need to work on recruiting and retaining more folks to care for our veterans and help process their disability claims. We must also address mental health and continue to work to end veteran suicide nationwide. It is also past time that we finally pass comprehensive reform for toxic exposure. Since I introduced the Cost of War Act last year, we've seen a lot of progress. VA has created a new presumptive process that has added a dozen new presumptions, including the 9 announced last week by the President. But we can't just rely on the executive branch. Congress has to take action and has a constitutional responsibility to do its job on behalf of veterans. If we're going to fulfill our obligation to veterans, we need to roll up our sleeves and we need to do our jobs. And we need to work together in a bipartisan and bicameral way to deliver the results you need and that you have earned. Today, I want to give a special welcome to Jan Thompson, who is president of the American Defenders of the Bataan and Corridor Memorial Society. April 9th of this year marks the 80th anniversary of the Bataan Death March. I would particularly like to remember Ben Steele from Billings, Montana, a survivor of the Bataan Death March who contributed a great deal to our state and to our country. He survived the Battle of Bataan, the Bataan Death March, and a hell ship to Japan, what we used to call the Japanese ships transporting American POWs, and forced labor in a coal mine. During his 42 months of imprisonment, he kept his sanity by sketching Montana scenes of cowboys, horses, and barns. He came back home to Montana and spent the rest of his life teaching art and supporting students in his community. They don't make them like Ben Steele anymore, and we certainly do miss him. I send my thoughts to his family and all other survivors and family members on this important anniversary. For the veterans here today, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for your work on behalf of your fellow veterans. We look forward to hearing from each one of you. Now I'll turn it back to Chairman Takano.
Thank you, Senator Tester. I appreciate the courtesy of all the chairs and ranking members up here today, and I want to extend the courtesy to Senator Cruz, who is with us here today, to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to join you. Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Bost, members of the committee. It is my honor and my privilege to introduce American Legion National Commander Paul Dillard to your committees. Commander Dillard is a proud Texan and a veteran who has dedicated his life to serving our country and serving our veterans. When he graduated from Whitesboro High School in 1965, he joined the Navy and ended up serving 4 tours in Vietnam. Upon coming home to Texas, Commander Dillard went to college, first at Grayson County Junior College, then East Texas State University. He got married to his wife Donna, started a family, and eventually went on to start his own business, Dillard & Gann Insurance. Commander Dillard has been a member of the American Legion for 53 years, since 1969. He has served in many leadership roles in the American Legion over the years, including as post commander, vice commander, the chairman of many committees, the commander of the Department of Texas, the national vice commander, just to name a few. He was elected as national commander last September and is focusing his efforts on the theme, No Veteran Left Behind. Commander Dillard and his wife Donna have been married for 39 years. They have 2 sons, William and Jonathan, and 2 grandsons who were members of the American Legion family as well. It is my great pleasure that I introduce to you a fellow Texan, Commander Dillard, as he gives this joint session a report on the American Legion. Thank you.
Commander, I'm going to give the opening statements to the ranking members. I will now recognize Ranking Member Bost and then Senator Moran, and then we'll have the opening statements from you. Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Many of you who know me know that in my life here and in my life before I got here, I wore many hats. So whenever I give this testimony this morning, I hope that you can allow me to wear that one of the hat I'm kind of proud of. You know, it's an honor to meet with the Chairman Takano, Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, in welcoming you here today. My name is Mike Bost, and I am the leading Republican for the House Republican VA Committee. I'm also a veteran, the son of a Korean War veteran and the grandson of a Korean War veteran, the uncle or the nephew of a Vietnam veteran who suffered from the ultimate oxymoron, friendly fire, and has 100% disability, but also has had a very successful life after coming home from Vietnam. But I'm also the father of a Marine veteran, an active Marine, and a grandfather of an active Marine. Like you, I know what it's like to serve, and I know what it's like to stop serving. It's a tough transition, but I've done it, as I know all of you have as well. I still apply the lessons I learned during my active service to my daily life. That's especially true of my work on this committee, and why I think these joint hearings are such valuable traditions. You understand the problems what we face, because they're your problems too. Your service here in Washington and throughout the country makes a difference, and I appreciate it. It's been a difficult couple of years for all of us, and veterans have not been immune from it. The American Legion and the other VSOs represented here today are needed now more than ever to help our veterans get the care, benefits, and services they need. I'm grateful for each one of you for your work, both in your active service time and now beyond. You know, I'm proud of what we've accomplished together so far this Congress, and I'm excited for the accomplishments that lie ahead. What is top of mind for me, and I know for many of us as well, is the veterans who are suffering from toxic exposure. Helping them is our number one priority this Congress. We still have a long way to go to get there, and this Congress is not getting any longer. I've heard loud and clear the call of the VSOs community for a comprehensive bill that addresses both care and benefits for toxic exposed veterans. The time to work across the aisle and across the Capitol to get one for you is now. We must also work hand in hand with Secretary McDonough. He actually last week added 9 new respiratory cancers to VA list of presumptive conditions. And I appreciate his leadership in using the authority that Congress has given to the VA and his actions to ensure that veterans can get the benefits they've earned. I encourage the Secretary to continue to act where appropriate on behalf of toxic exposed veterans. And I also encourage Chairman Takano and my colleagues in the House to act to pass Chairman Tester's and Ranking Member Moran's Health Care for Burn Pit Veterans Act. The Senate sent that bill our way 3 weeks ago. This is an important first step to fulfill our promises to toxic exposed veterans. And every day the House fails to send it to the President is another day that toxic exposed veterans cannot get care that they need from the VA. However, I want to underscore my commitment that it is only the first step, and additional steps will be needed to address other benefits. VSOs have been a critical advocate on toxic exposure, and I know that you will all continue to be so. I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing, and I am proud to be in the fight with you at all times. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Now, Ranking Member Moran, Senator Moran.
Chairman Takano, thank you very much for hosting us today, and it's good to be back in this room and hear from our veteran service organizations. Commander Dillard, welcome. I too can't wear the hat that Ranking Member Bost does, but I am a member of the Sons of the American Legion, and I'm an honorary member of the post in Mulvane, Kansas, the American Legion Riders, and I appreciate my relationship with your organization so much. I appreciate it because you speak so well for the veterans that are your members and even veterans who are not. Thank you to our other VSO partners for joining us today to share with us your membership's top priorities for the remainder of this Congress. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. I hope that when we join each other together in 2023 that we're all together in person. And in that regard, I want to recognize all the Kansans, American Legion members, and others who are joining us today by technology. To start with, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to the American Legion for your strong and early support of a bill I introduced guaranteeing health care access to personnel who served, called Hcbs, which would work to close the gaps in VA care by ensuring certain and consistent coverage to veterans who get their care through the VA, including often hard-to-reach veterans such as those in rural and highly rural areas, tribal veterans, and those living overseas. I look forward to continuing to partner with you to get this, what I consider a very important piece of legislation, across the finish line. Additionally, I want to thank the American Legion for your continued partnership with the VA to bring telehealth access to rural communities through Atlas Initiative. I look forward to seeing you soon. I look forward to seeing soon the Atlas Pod that is set to come online in Emporia, Kansas later this month. And I'm pleased that Kansas veterans in that area of my state will now have better access to VA telemedicine. I want to thank the American Legion also and the Military Officers Association for your support of the Healthcare for Burn Pit Veterans Act, which was co-sponsored by every single member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee and passed out of the Senate by unanimous consent last month. I thank Chairman Tester and Ranking Member Bost for their work, and I look forward to continuing our efforts to cooperate with Chairman Takano to get all four corners to a solution that is in the best interests of all veterans. We share a number of priorities, from meeting the challenges for caring for our toxic exposed veterans and addressing the disability claims backlog to continued enhanced suicide prevention and mental health care, and improving access and choice in health care, as well as working toward improved educational benefits and expansion and flexibility to assist veterans through COVID-19 pandemic. You have my commitment that the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee will continue to partner with you and the larger veteran community on addressing these and other priorities. I look forward to your presentations today, but before yielding back, I want to again thank all members of the United States military currently serving in NATO countries, including those with the 1st Infantry Division from Fort Riley, Kansas. They and the people of Ukraine are in our thoughts and prayers. We're having confirmed what everyone who served in our military over a long period of time knows: the price of freedom is not easy to attain. And the people of Ukraine and their leaders not only are in our thoughts and prayers, but they provide us with inspiration, a reminder of the sacrifice that's often necessary. Thank you again for your testimony today, and I yield back.
I thank the ranking member for his comments. I associate myself with his last comments regarding our service members who are currently serving and our situation in Ukraine. Let me point out to the commander, before I recognize him for his 5 minutes, of my own association. I do not wear the hat that my colleague does from the state of Illinois, but I did benefit from an American Legion program, Boys State. I can't remember if it was 78 or 79. It was a long time ago, but I certainly appreciated that opportunity, and think it's a great program all across the country. So let me now introduce our witnesses, and I will now recognize our witnesses for our first panel for their opening statements. First, we have Mr. Paul E. Dillard, National Commander of the American Legion. He is accompanied by Lawrence Montroy, the National Legislative Director, Ralph Bozella, Chairman of the Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation Commission, James Lacourciere, Chairman of the Veterans Employment and Education Commission, Joe Sharp, Director of Veterans Employment and Education, and Katie Perswell, Director of Veteran Affairs and Rehabilitation at the American Legion. Commander Dillard, you are recognized for 5 minutes to present your testimony.
First of all, I would like to make a comment of thanking Senator Cruz for his kind introduction for a fellow Texan. Chairman Takano, Chairman Tester, Ranking Members Bost and Moran, members of the House and Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a stark reminder that peace is fragile. At any time, with or without notice, military personnel may be called upon to defend our freedom. An essential purpose of the American Legion is to ensure those personnel are not forgotten after the fighting is over. The American Legion was founded largely on that idea. As you see from our legislative priorities for the second session of the 117th Congress, peer support is a central theme. And as veterans, we're all peers. No matter where we served, no matter when we served, or who we are. Peer support is based upon the American Legion's continued to fight for government accountability to men and women exposed to dangerous toxins while in uniform. Peer support is why we led the fight to obtain health care benefits for bomb test veterans who were exposed to atomic radiation. The American Legion later proved to the world, with the help from Columbia University, that the defoliant Agent Orange poisoned tens of thousands of our peers, Vietnam veterans. And today, on behalf of our comrades from the newest era, we implore Congress to deliver long overdue relief, assistance and recognition for veterans who suffer due to the exposure to the toxic fumes burn pits in the Middle East. Specifically, we call for a three-pronged approach. One, concede that exposure occurred to all veterans deployed to identified locations during the Gulf War and the global war on terror. Two, establish a list of presumptive illnesses associated with exposure to burn pits and other toxic hazards where scientific evidence exists. And three, create a framework for the VA to establish additional presumptive illnesses when scientific evidence shows an association. Veterans who are suffering now cannot wait decades to receive the care they need and rightfully deserve, as was the fate for so many veterans exposed to Agent Orange. Whether a veteran was exposed to toxins in the jungle of Vietnam or a combat outpost in Iraq, we in the American Legion all stand as peers who have been down this road before and know the government can do better to accept responsibility and help these veterans as they confront illnesses caused by preventable exposures. This value is written into our American Legion Constitution preamble to concentrate and sanctify our comradeship by our devotion to mutual happiness. That vow, over a century old, guides our spirit and peer support today. There is perhaps no better example of the power of peer support than Buddy Check program, which American Legion launched in 2019. More than 3,600 American Legion posts performed Buddy Check outreach services for veterans in 2020, and nearly 3,800 did so again in 2021. Approximately 500,000 veterans have been assisted through this program. Some veterans have needed food, medicine, or household repairs. Others needed to understand how VA could help them. The majority was simply glad to hear a fellow veteran's voice during a difficult time. Isolation is no friend to the veteran who may be confronting post-trauma stress disorder and possibly a risk of suicide, and in need of connection with others who understand. That is why we strongly support the expansion of Buddy Check into a national week outreach by VA. A National Buddy Check Week can help bridge that gap between veterans in need and VA services to help them. Connections like that is why we also strongly support the attachment of trained peer support specialists to posts of the American Legion and other veterans organizations around the country. American Legion peer support extends to the immigrant veterans who have always served in the United States Armed Forces. For most of our nation's existence, that service opened a reliable pathway to U.S. citizenship. More than 760,000 immigrants have become naturalized U.S. citizens this way. In the last few years, however, that pathway has been obstructed. Citizenship assistance programs have faded from our military bases. U.S. veterans from other nations are serving honorably and then discharging as resident alien non-citizens. They come out confused. Why did their service not bring them citizenship, let alone expedited citizenship they believe was promised to them? And then, in the worst case, they are deported and disconnected from the VA benefits they've earned. Thank you, Chairman Takano, for your leadership on behalf of our immigrants, military peers who served honorably but were later deported because U.S. citizenship was next to impossible for them while they were in service, fighting on our behalf. The American Legion proudly supports the Veterans Deportation Prevention and Reform Act that addresses naturalization during service and protects non-citizen veterans and their families from unwarranted deportation. Peer support drives the American Legion ongoing priority to improve VA healthcare service for women, the fastest growing demographic among our peers. The Protecting Moms Who Served Act was one step, among many more that need to be taken before women feel comfortable and well served in all VA medical facilities. Peer support is why we continue to fight for fair GI Bill education benefits for reserves and National Guard veterans who have served on the front line of America's dangerous battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, but have not accrued GI Bill points unless they receive federal orders. Peer support stirred the American Legion outrage when we learned that barracks of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center had become so run down that showers and air conditioners did not work. Locks were broken. Sanitary conditions were nearly unlivable for years. Quality of life for military personnel and publicity breakdowns like this have a definite impact and willingness of young people to enlist or stay in the service. Peer support is always why we demand that U.S. Coast Guard personnel are protected for pay interruptions in the event government shutdowns, as are the other branches of the military service. They should be receiving their pay. And this brings me back to Ukraine. Today, as U.S. troops deploy to Eastern Europe to defend our allies in case the war expands, history reminds us again that we never know when or with what notice men and women will be called upon to fight. How we treat them now and in the years ahead, when the effects of their sacrifice are upon them, is certain to be more than a matter of compassion, but one of national security as well. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we are witnessing Europe's largest ground war since World War II. It's disheartening to know there are still World War II veterans who do not have access to VA health care and the benefits. The American Legion is fighting to correct this lapse with legislative pending in Congress. Our World War II veterans halted the spread of tyranny, securing our democracy for generations to come. As of last month, fewer than 240,000 World War II veterans remain, and hundreds pass away every day. And I want to thank both the House and the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee for passing bills that would rectify this. Time is literally running out for these veterans. It is critically important that one of these bills is enacted into law soon as possible. It is time that we do this now while we still have some of that greatest generation still with us. We're losing them too quick. Let's honor them. Thank y'all for passing that bill. Now we just need to get the work done. Chairman Takana, Chairman Tester, ranking members Bost and Moran, on behalf of more than 3 million members of the American Legion family, the American Legion Auxiliary, the Sons of the American Legion, I thank you for the opportunity to present just some of our American Legion's legislative priorities for this session of Congress. And we look forward to your questions and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander, and for your testimony. And without objection, your written testimony in full will be included in the hearing record. I now of them is, you know, your priorities are fully mine. I want you to know that. You know, it strikes me that, well, I'm proud of the fact that Democrats and Republicans have come together to act immediately on $12 billion in emergency aid to Ukraine. There's an urgency that we see. Commander, do you believe, as I do, but there's also an urgency to attend to the unfinished business of our toxic exposed veterans, to make sure that we do concede exposure for the purpose of giving health care to 3.5 million veterans who were probably exposed, the framework for future presumptions, and ensuring that we actually approve a list of presumptions. Although the VA has made progress on 9 more, we have a more extensive list of 23 in the bill. Do you believe, as I do, that getting this unfinished business done deserves the same sort of bipartisan sense of urgency? Because I believe these veterans are still in the heat of battle with the things that they're continuing to fight as a result of their service.
Yes, sir, Chairman Takano. As a Vietnam veteran, Agent Orange, we can't wait 40 years. They need the VA health care that they're entitled to and they have earned. Yes, we wholeheartedly, the American Legion, would like Congress to take actions on a toxic bill and get those listed. It's the first step, and then we can keep improving as scientific evidence brings others to the forefront. Yes, sir.
You spoke a lot about peers and and how you have a wonderful program of you've advocated for the inclusion of Buddy Check Week as a way to strengthen VA's peer support specialist program. And I included the Buddy Check program as well as other helpful ideas in H.R. 6411, the Bipartisan Bicameral Strong Veterans Act. Can you say more about how vital peer support is in helping veterans with mental health and substance use challenges?
Yes, Chairman Tom. A veteran talking to another veteran is so much different than talking to someone that don't understand where you've been and how you got there. I've traveled the last 6 months throughout the United States as National Commander. There is stories after stories I've heard on the success. I've heard from other veterans saying, I saved a life. They got them help. We know Buddy Check works. And for them to talk to a veteran, there's no doubt about it that it's a very strong program because, you know, over 500,000 we've got to visit and talk with. And some of them, like I said, it's nice. Isolation, loneliness. That's when things creep back. That's when we can help them most with that phone call. So, yes.
Well, thank you, sir. I now want to recognize Senator Tester for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. And Commander Dillard, thank you for being here today. I want to take you back a few years when you served in Vietnam and were exposed to Agent Orange. I think somebody said 4 tours. It might have been you. We certainly appreciate that service. As we talk about Agent Orange, 49 years after the U.S. presence ended in Vietnam, we still haven't dealt with that issue totally yet from a presumptive standpoint. Hypertension, for example, otherwise known as high blood pressure, which there is direct scientific evidence that if you were exposed to Agent Orange, you could get hypertension. It was directly connected. Still is not covered. What would you tell somebody in my position if they said, you know, we can't cover hypertension because it costs too much money?
I would say you wrote the check for the war to send our veterans in harm's way. It's time to cash that check.
So your organization has a number of veterans that served in the Gulf. that were exposed to burn pits and oil well fires and those kind of toxins. What are you hearing from them?
Of course, many of those remember and know Agent Orange, the toxic. This is what they think about more than anything, and they do worry about what may be on the horizon for tomorrow. Will the VA be there? Will the presumptive be there to take care of me?
So I want to move to another issue, albeit that I think toxic exposure is, we haven't dealt with it well in the past, and we need to start dealing with it better today, and that's why we have a number of bills dealing with that issue, and we need to get them done this Congress. But VA recently narrowed eligibility for the Caregivers program, a program that I know you're aware of. I am disturbed by reports that veterans are and caregivers in Montana are being rejected at very, very, very high rates, including caregivers have been a part of the program for years and years. What's your membership experiencing with the Caregivers program and the application and appeals process?
Yes, Chairman Tester, we're very disturbed because of the hardship it puts on that caregiver. But I would like to ask my Director of Veterans Affairs Rehabilitation, Ms. Purcell.
Commander, if you don't mind, I'd like to.
Ralph?
Doc, yes. Commander, I'd like to handle that. Thank you. Ralph Bozzella, Chairman of the Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation Commission. We're finding out that the caregivers applying for those claims are being rejected at 86 to 87%, and we don't know why those claims, those caregivers cannot appeal those claims through the VBA system, and that needs to be fixed. We have to care for those who care for our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment, and Commander Dillard, thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, you know, right now, law-abiding citizens or law-abiding veterans are losing their Second Amendment rights simply because the VA appoints them a fiduciary to manage their VA financial benefits. My bill is H.R. 1217. The Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act would prevent these veterans from losing their right to bear arms unless, and this is an important unless a court has found them to be a danger to themselves or others, just like any other citizen of this United States, not because of the fact that they're a veteran, but because they're a citizen of the United States. Can I get your organization to support the bill that would stop that from occurring and the recommendation of the NICS, recommending anybody that has a fiduciary to the NICS system?
Yes, sir, Ranking Member. We will, the American Legion will support that, and we do support that because no bureaucrat should be able to determine to ruin or take away your Second Amendment rights to bear arms.
Yeah. And I think it's a vitally important issue for us to deal with, because when we're dealing with the amount of suicides that our veterans are having every day, many veterans, of the 20 a day, even though the 2019 studies show that we reduced that by a small amount, that only 6 of those have ever been inside a VA or ever sought VA help. And I believe that there are a lot of communities where our veterans are that they're choosing not to seek that help because of this particular thing that has been talked, because veterans talk among themselves of things that are out there. And so I'm hoping that we can get that moved through. You know, also, you know, if the PACT Act is passed by the House last week, was signed into law, VA expects its claims backlogs to be more than double, and VA health care wait times to significantly increase. In the recent years, we've brought down wait times for VA significantly through the collective hard work. Through our collective hard work, the PACT Act could single-handedly destroy that progress. Do you agree that understanding the impacts are important considerations prior to proceeding with what could be an extensive expansion of eligibility?
Ranking Member, I'd like for my colleague here, Mr. Motorell, to elaborate on that, please.
Right, Member Boss, we absolutely agree that how a piece of legislation is going to impact the VA, especially when it's so large, needs to be understood. But we certainly would like to reiterate our call for the need for comprehensive action and the need for a bill that has a concession of exposure, has a list of presumptives, and has a presumptive framework. But we should absolutely understand the impact of VA.
Yeah, I think it's vitally important that everyone understands, that everybody sitting up here on this dais and everybody in the committee knows how important, because the first first group of questions, and you're going to continue to hear that day, is about toxic exposure and how important it is. But we've got to make sure that as we move forward, it's something that we can do, we can provide, not that it's something we can come out and do a press pop with, but it's something that we can get across the finish line and signed into by the President so that our veterans can quickly receive the health care that they need. And with that, my time's run out, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Ranking Member Moran, Senator Moran.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. Again, Commander, thank you. I appreciate your presence here today, but I also greatly enjoyed our conversation in my office. And we like Texans generally in Kansas, except during football season and basketball season. But we may even like you during those times. I want to highlight again a project that the American Legion is significantly involved in, and I'm excited that a pod is arriving in Emporia, Kansas. Has a great history in regard to veterans, the American Legion, and Emporia, Kansas does. It's a very significant place in the history of caring for veterans, and you've partnered to provide that opportunity for an Atlas pilot program to include Emporia. I just want to give the American Legion, your colleagues, a chance to talk about that partnership with Phillips. Tell me what you hope it will achieve. Tell me and the committee how we can help that be achieved, and what we can do once the pilot program is completed, assuming that it assures us of the things that we're looking for. How do we make sure it's expanded elsewhere?
Yes, sir, Ranking Member Moran. The best person that I can think of would be Ms. Perswell to address this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Senator. We're so happy to have the Atlas Pod in Kansas. We really want to thank Phillips for facilitating this pilot program and bringing us into the fold. Anything that we can do to help support our veterans in especially mental health care at this time, we're happy to be involved with. The Kansas Pod, as I'm sure you know, is now complete, and they are hoping to do a soft opening here in the next week or two and start seeing patients right away. It's critical things like the Atlas Pod go through, because there are rural veterans and veterans that have trouble with access to internet to be able to go to their appointments. They need a safe place that is clinical, that is clean, that there is someone there to help them with the technology that they may not have access to in rural areas. It's also vitally important that this pilot succeed. We need to have more pods like this in other rural communities for veterans to access.
I thank you, and again, I look forward to being there. We're talking about having a ribbon cutting, and I look forward to being with Kansas American Legions. Would invite you and the commander to join us as well as we celebrate one more advancement toward providing, in this case, mental health services to veterans who live in rural and highly rural areas. 19 seconds. I would just highlight that we know that President Biden is supportive of the PACT Act. We know that the Secretary has testified it has challenges in being implemented prior to the President's endorsement. But we have given the Secretary of Veterans Affairs the authority to do something he or his successors could not do: provide health care to every veteran post 9/11 who is experienced or will experience consequences due to toxic exposure. The Department of Veterans Affairs has the authority to provide additional presumptions. We're working in the Senate to provide the framework, but we're anxious for the Secretary to, by April 1, provide us with the information that he has garnered. Why would you think, if the Secretary has the authority to provide more presumptions to toxic exposure, that he hasn't utilized that authority to do so?
Once again, I will let Lawrence Motrell answer that.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank you for that question, Senator Moran. The VA has certainly been proactive as it pertains to presumptives for toxic exposure. We've seen that with 12 presumptives within the past 8 months, but we would certainly like to see them move forward expeditiously and look at some of the other cancers that we all know there's scientific evidence for.
I wanted to live up to Congressman Boss' suggestion that all of us were going to talk about toxic exposure, and I didn't want to be the one who didn't. It is hugely important to each and every one of us in this committee and certainly to those we serve. Thank you.
Representative Brownlee, Chairwoman Brownlee, you're recognized for 3 minutes. Chairwoman Brownlee, your microphone, are you muted still, or is it a technical problem with us? Are you unmuted? What does our technical team say? Pardon me? All right. Chairwoman Brownlee, let's go to Senator Sinema. We'll come back to you. Senator Sinema? I can't hear Senator Sinema either. Okay. Yeah. We can't hear them here. Okay. All right. Congressman Roy, I'll call on you next. Yeah, until we can get the audio fixed with the people on Zoom so we can hear it, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Appreciate each and every one of you for being here today. Commander Dillard, appreciate having a Texan here in the room. I echo Senator Cruz's remarks in introducing you here, and thank you for your service and all of you for your service. It's an honor to be here with y'all. There's so many, we got 3 minutes. Obviously, we have so many members that want to talk to you, so it's hard to go through all the issues that are so important. Obviously, we talk on a regular basis with those who are in our districts and our communities, but appreciate the opportunity here with testimony. I'd love to talk about Second Amendment rights and protecting veterans' Second Amendment rights. We've got legislation. Ranking Member Boss and I both have bills ensuring that our veteran community is not losing their ability to defend themselves because of PTSD and other issues. And I'd love to talk with you all about that, and happy to independently. I've talked to a lot of folks in Texas 21, where I represent Fort Sam Houston, represent Army Futures, represent thousands of veterans in and around San Antonio and Austin. As you all know, that area is highly populated with veterans because it's, the best district and the best state in America. So it attracts a lot of veterans. But I did want to just throw to you all for one just general question. Something that I think probably drives me the most in terms of my service on Veterans Affairs is wait times and quality of service with respect to healthcare access. We all want to deal with the burn pit issues, and we're trying to work through that. And there's some differences of opinion on how to do that, and we're going to work through that. We've got to do it responsibly, and we need to work hard to do that. But in general, just a general question for you all about your experience with wait times. I get updates, and I ask my constituents to advise me every time they hit an issue, and I just keep trying to give me examples. And then I go feed it to the VA head in South Texas and to try to improve it. But if you could speak a little bit to that, whichever ones of you is appropriate, about your experience with wait times, what you're seeing with wait times, what you're seeing with the quality of care, and do you think it's where it needs to be? And do you have, any of your fellow veterans and people that have run into snags, that run into bureaucracy, that can't get in and out of the Mission Act private care into the VA, running into database issues, running into slowdowns, try to get MRI, can't get an MRI, try to get, because I get a lot of those. So I just want to hear from you all what you're hearing, your experience there.
Yes, Congressman, and I understand where you're coming from, and I do hear that also. I've been fortunate. I haven't had that problem per se, and the VA healthcare is all I use. And so it has been good, but Ralph Bozella, our chairman of Veterans Affairs Rehabilitation, can probably shed more light.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Congressman Roy. Access is the #1 thing for any veteran, and I think whether we have care on a VA campus or care through care in the community, through the Mission Act, we have to always remember that any care we get through VA is still VA care. VA is still the primary provider. There are access issues because of many barriers. The recruitment and retention of providers, particularly in rural areas. I think the rural healthcare system really needs a strong look from VA. If a VA undersecretary is nominated for VHA and we get that kind of leadership in there, I would hope that rural health is a primary target for fixing those exact kind of issues. I think that we need to recruit more community care providers, people who want to work with VA. There's contractual issues with that, and the #1 thing that has to happen when a veteran goes to community care is the records must be transferred back to VA in a timely fashion, and also that bill must be paid or the veterans get stuck with bill payments. I can go on about this, but the time is up, and I think you get the message.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Congressman Roy. The situation is that we can't hear what our online participants are saying, so when they ask questions of our witnesses can't hear. So we're going to test this again. Chairwoman Brownlee, I'm going to ask you to try to ask your questions and see if it works so that our witnesses can hear what your questions are. So Chairwoman Brownlee, give it another try. I'm afraid we can't hear Chairwoman Brownlee. We're gonna keep trying to fix it, and while we're fixing it, I'm going to go on to Senator, Mr. Mann. Mr. Mann is online, right? So he's not. So we're going to prioritize people here in the room. So Senator Boozman, Senator, we're going to go to you next because the next person online, we can't hear him. So Senator Boozman, go ahead.
Thank you. I was asking you about San Antonio. My dad was a waist gunner on B-17s and got his training there. Met my mom, and it was one of those deals like, you meet 3 months later, you're engaged and married and all of that, and we were married for, till he passed away in his late 60s. So lots of good memories of the old days going down there through the years. But first of all, I want to thank you all. I've had the opportunity to serve now in the Senate VA committee and then in the House. And I can tell you, 99% of the things we get done is because of the advocacy of our veteran service organizations. You all do a tremendous job, and a big shout out as always to the auxiliaries. Nobody does a better job. They certainly are the backbone. My wife reminds me most of the time they're also the brains of any organization. So we appreciate them very, very much. But I wanted to just ask about something that's a little bit different, and burn pits are so important, but we got a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. CDC estimates that between years 2000 and 2020, more than 430,000 U.S. service members were diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, TBI, and other traumas, including military sexual trauma, are major health concerns for service members and veterans due to their direct link to PTSD, in addition to putting these members at higher risk of suicide. The post-9/11 Veterans Mental Health Care Improvement Act, which was passed out of this committee unanimously, calls on the VA to conduct a study on the efficacy of clinical and at-home resources for PTSD to include the use of mobile applications, family members, as well as other veterans when dealing with stressors. Commander, can you discuss the challenges of service members and veterans suffering from TBI, PTSD, and mental health issues, and why is it so important for service members and veterans to be able to choose treatments that work best for them?
Yes, Congressman, I'm going to ask to to address that. She's really on top of it.
I know she is. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for that question. As someone who suffers from TBI and PTSD, I have found a lot of challenges. It's really important for us to understand that people who suffer from things like TBI and PTSD sometimes have difficulties with a lot of different tasks. It's on. I'm not sure why it's not working now, but one of the biggest challenges is getting to appointments. The distances that you have to drive and all of the steps that you have to take to get those appointments taken care of and to get care, it really bogs down the veteran's ability to seek care. Anything that you do that makes it more difficult to seek care creates a barrier. So things that you were saying, clinical and at-home resources, that's critical. It's critical for people with TBI, PTSD. Sometimes we can't get out of the house. Sometimes we're taking so many medications, we can't drive or there's no one to drive us. So being able to seek care in your home is a game changer. That would be wonderful.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to try again with Chairwoman Brownlee. Chairwoman Brownlee, can you try again to ask your questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Breakthrough. Okay. So Chairwoman, continue.
Excellent. Thank you, Commander, for being here, and thank you to you and all of your members and your families for your service to our country. Senator Tester talked about, in his questioning, the caregiver program, and I certainly support his concerns with regards to the caregiver program. I'm trying to enhance in-home care for our veterans, for all veterans who need it, whether they be disabled or elderly. And I introduced a bill last week, and we are calling it the Elizabeth Dole Home and Community-Based Services for Veterans and Caregivers Act of 2022. We wanted to name it after Elizabeth Dole because of all of her good work, particularly around caregivers. But the objective of this bill is really to really change the paradigm within the VA for disabled and our elderly. More than half of our veteran population are over the age of 65, to change the paradigm from institutionalized care to home care. I think it's an important bill. I think it's what veterans want. I think it's win-win. It's a win-win program because I think it is less expensive actually to take care at a high quality level of veterans at home versus institutionalized care. And I know from all the veterans that I speak to, everyone wants to stay at home if they are able to stay at home. So I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the bill. I know in your written testimony, you talked about long-term care. It sort of sounded like my bill. Was wondering if you've had a chance to review it, and if so, if you support it.
Yes, Congresswoman, we have reviewed it, and we definitely support it because we believe a veteran, if possible, care at home would be much, much better for them during that hard time. So yes, we support your bill.
Well, I look forward to working with you and all the other VSOs to, get this over the finish line. I think it's, we're talking about a lot of important bills, the caregiver bill, toxins, the PACT Act, and I think this stands up there in importance, and I look forward to working with you on it. And again, thank you for your service and thank you for being here. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brownlee, and I agree with you that the long-term care is truly a priority that we need to address, and especially in light of what we've experienced during this pandemic, I think it's brought those issues to the forefront. Let us turn now to Senator Sinema, Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. Commander Dillard, thank you for your service to this nation and for the service your organization does for America's veterans. I appreciate the American Legion's support for expanding telehealth, especially for veterans in rural areas. The American Legion was instrumental in placing an Atlas pod in Wickenburg, Arizona, saving veterans hours of transportation to the nearest VA clinic. We look forward to continuing the work with the American Legion to support and promote that site so it can serve Arizona veterans to the fullest extent possible. To my question, Commander Dillard, home ownership can lead to more stable family lives, better health outcomes, and personal economic benefits. Yet this dream remains out of reach for many Americans and Arizonans, including our veterans. I've heard that when applying for a residential mortgage, less than 12% of qualified veterans take advantage of their earned benefit of the VA loan. Why do you think so few veterans utilize a VA loan? And do you believe that veterans don't know they may qualify for a VA home loan, or that a VA mortgage may lead to overall lower cost to the borrower?
Yes, Congressman. I would like to ask my Chairman, Jim Luxier, to respond to that, please. Or the Director, fine, Joe, you can handle it.
Thank you very much for that question. There are currently some issues with the home loan program. It's currently not as competitive as many of the other private sector home loan programs. And we have testified in the past about doing whatever we can to increase that competitiveness of the home loan program. One of the biggest barriers to veterans being able to take out a home loan is the fact that they really don't know all the ins and outs of the program itself. And we have stated that we'd like to see VA do a better job of outreach as far as making sure that veterans are aware of their program and their other benefits. And the other thing is to make sure that veterans are prepared to be competitive with the private sector themselves. Financial literacy is a huge issue. And even though it's a great program where you don't have to pay any money down, it still will make veterans more competitive if they're taught how to be sure to save enough money where they can compete with the private sector and putting money down as well. So those are some of the issues with the home loan program, and we definitely feel like veterans, especially in high-cost areas, need greater assistance. Thank you.
A follow-up question. Loan officers may not be steering buyers away from VA loans, but they're not required to disclose a VA mortgage option. Do you think that more widespread disclosure would help protect veterans and ensure that they can access that earned benefit?
We definitely believe that that should happen. Again, many veterans aren't aware of their benefits, and the home loan program is one of those benefits that veterans aren't really been briefed on. And with that, that would make us much more competitive as far as purchasing a home loan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sinema. Representative Banks, recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the guests that we have here today. Such an important topic. We appreciate your leadership. As I reached out to my local county veteran service officers about the hearing today, I asked them, what do you want me to ask about when we speak with all of you? And Mr. Dillard, one of the concerns that I heard among many of my VSOs, and as well as the many aging veterans throughout the counties that I represent, is about the incessant amount of paperwork that it takes to file for VA pension benefits. In my district, we have many people who are filing for their pensions, and they've had their claims denied and then reinstated after appeal. And I hear this story over and over again as it's obviously unacceptable. Mr. Dillard, why is pension paperwork so large of an obstacle, and what can we do about it?
You're correct, Congressman, and that is a problem, and it is a stigma that runs rapid through our veterans. But I would like Ralph Bozzella works with this daily, and I'd like Ralph Bozzella to comment on it.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Congressman Banks. You know, the pension process sometimes gets lost in the overall claims process because veterans are typically filing claims for service-connected disabilities. That system is moving on with ideas for automation in that system. I'm not sure how that automation may affect the pension. But even in the claims process for disabilities, we think VA needs to hire more claims adjudicators, and I would think the same thing needs to happen in the pension process as well. And as to why the paperwork is more, because once the claims process went to the VBS management system and everything was scanned, that system became more manageable. So that's what I know about it. Thank you.
I appreciate that feedback. You know, again, as I talk to my local veteran service officers at the county level, I serve 12 counties, I'm always struck by how hard they work to serve veterans at the local level, often in many of the rural communities that I represent in Northeast Indiana. These selfless men and women who serve in this role at the local level, they often volunteer their time to help veterans navigate the complex bureaucracy of the VA. However, I've been told that inconsistent accountability standards means that the quality the veterans receive might vary from veteran service officer to veteran service officer. And I wonder, Mr. Dillard, if you have any comments about, is the American Legion satisfied with the performance of our veteran service officers at the local level, and what can Congress do to streamline some of the process or performance related issues that our VSOs deal with?
Yes, Congressman. Accrediting service officers is a big key so they can get through the process. And we understand there's some still working on it, so that is difficult times for our veterans to do that. And some of them actually get discouraged and disgusted, and they don't come back. And so that is a problem that we will be working through, and we need to communicate to our veterans more. We have service officers that do all this work for free also through the American Legion at different departments, fully accredited.
Thank you very much. My time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Senator Tillis, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander Dillard, thank you for being here. Thank you for your continued service and that of the team that you have with you there today. What a quick question or advice from you. I think that you're aware that we passed the Health Care for Burn Pit Veterans bill unanimously just a little while back out of the Senate. We now have the PACT Act lying in the Senate. We're going to have to reconcile some of the differences, our three-phase approach versus some of what's been proposed in the PACT Act. What advice would you give us as we try to reconcile those differences and move forward to make sure that we produce something that goes to the president's desk?
Yes, sir, Congressman. Once again, I'd like Lawrence Modrell to address that issue.
Thank you for that question, Senator. As the commander mentioned in his opening comments, we really feel that a comprehensive action is necessary, and I think we've heard that throughout the veteran community and the members of this committee, and certainly aware of the healthcare for burn pit veterans and allowing veterans access now to healthcare, those who are suffering now, and that's an important element, and that should be a part of any comprehensive approach that we take to address this issue. But I can't urge enough that a concession of exposure and a presumptive framework are essential elements as well, and really need to be included in any final legislative package as those bills are reconciled.
Thank you for that. Do you agree that we have to take care in the way we go about coming up with consensus to make absolutely certain that our current promises made to veterans are kept and that this is an additional installment on the debt that we owe them? In other words, we don't want to simply move forward and not be concerned with the potential resource impacts that it could have on current obligations.
That's certainly something always to be mindful of, but I think another thing to be mindful of the fact is that we wrote this check when we sent those veterans into combat and exposed them to these conditions and illness, diseases, and we need to ensure that they're taken care of and provided that health care.
I agree with that. Just briefly, I've only got 45 seconds, something that I've asked in the prior panels last week. What have we learned from COVID and the expansion of telehealth that should just become standard operating procedure within the VA?
Telehealth has helped tremendously, and especially in our rural areas. But we've grown, and many veterans are getting used to it, and they do like it instead of driving that distance. So telehealth is very important into our VA healthcare system, and we appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you again for your continued service. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Representative Mervan.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. Thank you all from the American Legion who are here today. Commander Dillard, thank you very much. Yesterday, I was proud to introduce H.R. 6961, the Dignity for MST Survivors Act, in an effort to reduce the potential for re-traumatization in MST claims appeal process as identified by our VSO partners. This legislation would require VA to ensure that members of the Board of Veterans Appeals complete annual MST training. This legislation would also require VA to review the language used in claim denial letters to ensure such language is carefully worded in order to avoid any re-traumatization of our veterans. Commander Dillard, I appreciate the attention to MST in your written testimony, as well as the American Legion's efforts to address this issue. In your view, what other steps must VA take in order to prevent the re-traumatization of MST survivors in the claim appeal process?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. And Ms. Purcell, our Director of Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation, will address that.
Thank you for that question. Just to start with, that bill sounds amazing. It sounds great. Making sure that MST survivors are not re-traumatized by reading through documents when they're being told that they're being denied is really important. We at the Legion, our appeals representatives have a special person who is trained to deal with those sensitive cases. So I think that is something that could be in addition to this bill, would be to make sure that you have someone who is trained to understand that there are sensitive issues, sensitive topics, sensitive phrases that should not be used when they're writing appeals letters. It takes a special person to be able to handle those kinds of claims and appeals. Not everybody is cut out for that, and we need to make sure that we're putting the right people in the right places.
I thank you very much. Additionally, I have a separate question. We know from the independent budget recommendations for VA that modernization of the Veterans Benefit Management System is a priority for several VSOs. Commander Dillard, do you have any perspective to share regarding the current state of the system? And do you believe that the VBMS is equipped to handle the anticipated influx of toxic exposure claims following congressional action on the toxic exposure?
Very important question, and thank you for that. And Ralph Bozzella, our chairman, will address that.
Thank you, Commander. Yes, Congressman, the system with the VBMS works, and it's now about 10, 12 years old because they took all that paperwork and scanned it, and then from that moment on, everything then was filed electronically. How long will that system last? Well, there's no doubt it has to be improved and updated like all electronic systems. We've heard from a VA employee the other day at one of our meetings that their new management system is working to upgrade that, but you still need to hire more claims adjudicators through the process in order to make it work.
I thank you, and with that, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Representative Mervan. We have a few members left, and I'm going to ask if you'd like to participate, members would like to participate in another round of questioning with our American Legion. So go ahead, Mr. Rosendale, 3 more minutes if you'd like to take 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. As with everyone else here making their comments about the toxic exposures, I want to make sure that I mention as well, and thank you all for being here. I've had some cancer ravaged my family. I lost a brother and a sister to cancer. So I'm very, very well aware and have seen firsthand the financial and emotional hardship that it causes families. And so I'm hypersensitive to it. I want to make sure that we get that assistance out immediately. I would love to have passed the Senate legislation so that we can get that treatment out there. And I was really glad to hear today that we're not only looking at defining the exposure, where and how it took place, the conditions, but also to have this framework with which we don't have to go back out and figure out how are we going to identify other conditions that arise, that framework is going to be there so that we can just pull the trigger on it and start getting that assistance right away. Additionally, I was glad to hear the conversations about the red flag laws and our Second Amendment rights for our veterans. I have hosted the Wounded Warriors out at my ranch to go hunting. I've seen the Warriors in Quiet Waters programs in Montana, the Veteran Scuba program that we have there in Montana. And it's good to see all these additional programs that are being utilized for an area to vent, if you will, for the veterans to deal with some complexities they have in their life without subjecting them to the loss of their Second Amendment rights, because that is a really big problem. But we also have to recognize that we have a lot of veterans that are taking their lives, and they do use a firearm. And like the buddy check program that you were talking about, I think that's good. There's a program that I attended with veterans just to listen in, and it was called the Overwatch Project. And the Overwatch Project is dedicated towards getting time and distance between the veterans and their firearms without violating their Second Amendment rights, without passing red flag laws. And I think that it would be great for everybody to take a look at that and see if they could spread the word around their community, because they've been very successful at helping the veterans without violating their rights. Commander, if I could, I would like to direct this question to Mr. Sharp, because it is about education. Have you heard about the new interpretation that's been given to the 85-15 rule, which is going to change from 15% of the veterans who receive support from the VA to 15% of the veterans who receive support from any financial institution in order to identify that eligibility? Because we've got colleges and universities and veterans on a mass scale that are going to be disqualified from utilizing that benefit because the interpretation is changing.
Thank you for that question. The American Legion is aware that there is an issue with the 85-15 rule. And we're very concerned that any new interpretation that may disqualify a veteran from receiving a quality education that leads to gainful employment, we would not be for.
Exactly. So I would ask, I see that my time is out, but I would ask for your support to work with you on that to make sure that interpretation is not changed.
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, I would yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rosendale. I see that Representative Slotkin has joined us, and Representative Slotkin, I'm going to recognize you for the first round of questioning. Mr. Mervan, are you intending to question for a second round?
Not at this time.
Okay, so go ahead, Representative Slotkin.
I'm sorry, Chairman. Give me 2 seconds. I wasn't expecting to get a question so quickly. Just give me 2 minutes so you can go on to someone else.
Well,
I apologize.
I can go ahead with my questioning then, and then I'll call on you. So I'm going to do my, I'll take my second question, and then I'll call on Representative Slotkin to do her first round. Commander, much concern has been expressed about overloading the VA with new eligibilities through the, I think rather through the PACT Act's first title, which deals with the concessions, which would enable, or make eligible 3.5 million veterans who were exposed, our war and terror veterans, and all of our overseas contingency veterans. But did the Legion take notice of the revisions that were made by the committee regarding the phasing in of eligibility over a 10-year period through, I think, 5 separate cohorts, so that the VA would not be suddenly deluged with 3.5 million eligibilities all at once? Could you comment on, what you might think the feasibility, did we improve the feasibility? We also definitely improved the cost outlook. We reduced spending, we reduced the cost to implement the bill by about $74 billion. Your response?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe Lawrence Motrell can answer that at a much better note than me, but that is a concern. Lawrence?
Thank you for that, Chairman. And we absolutely took a note of that, and I think the changes made certainly makes it more executable by VA. And it seems they've absolutely been supportive. We think that the PACT Act is one of the most comprehensive bills that we have seen. And if that were to make it to the Senate floor, we would absolutely urge members to vote for that bill. It includes everything that we think should be in the final comprehensive package, which includes concession of exposure, presumption of framework, and a list of presumptive conditions. Additionally, it goes further to take care of our Vietnam veterans, and it has the presumption for hypertension, which we think is essential. But certainly those changes in Title I, we would assess would make it more executable by VA.
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the comments of many of my colleagues in the Senate, our Republican colleagues in the Senate, who seem ostensibly to be, they're open to further discussions, and I appreciate your feedback on that. Just so that it's understood that there were technical questions raised by VA before we made these changes, and I do think that VA was made a lot more comfortable by the phase-in approach, so that they were not deluged with 3.5 million eligibilities all at once. I now would like to call on Representative Slotkin for 3 minutes. Go ahead, Representative Slotkin.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that, and sorry that I'm not in the room with you there. I represent Michigan. We were thrilled to have the PACT Act pass the House last week. And I really urge everybody to heed what we've been hearing from our panelists over the past week, just to get it done, get something done. But I guess my question is, is there to our witnesses, we all know Agent Orange. We all know what that meant for the Vietnam era. That's something that's well known, even sort of in common parlance. If you weren't a veteran, people know what Agent Orange is. We know that it created major health problems for a whole generation of veterans. What can we do to expose people more to understanding what burn pits do to their health? Because I think it's a post 9/11 generation set of ailments. It's someone like me who watched how many generations of young soldiers live next to burn pits in Iraq. So what can we do to educate people? What can we do to get exposure out there for this set of issues as this generation's Agent Orange?
Thank you for that question. First of all, we got to get a bill passed. We've got to get it in law. And then it's up to a lot of us VSOs to ensure we alert our members what is there, what is available. And we will do that. And so that's the key. And after that, it's communication because they need it. It's something that we've got, as you said, get her done. We got to get her done because our veterans, they deserve the benefits from the VA for their health, and we appreciate it.
Great, thank you. I think for me as a pragmatist, just understanding how the legislature works, making sure we get something done, Mr. Chairman, before the summer or before certainly this body breaks on August 1st, I think is extremely important. And the PACT Act, the version of the bill that we sent over the Senate, I think should be the basis of the conversation and the negotiation. We all want to help our veterans on a bipartisan basis, and appreciate anything you all can do to support the energy to push our Senate friends to get to it. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Slotkin. I take your words to heart. I was heartened to hear Ranking Member Moran say that he would like to see a Four Corners agreement on toxic exposure. And so I believe the spirit of comity with regard to getting agreement on this issue, I think, is very much in the air. And so I do take your comments to heart. So thank you. I see that Representative Miller Meeks has joined us. I'm going to recognize you for 3 minutes for this panel, and then I'm going to call a recess until we get our next panel in panel. But go ahead, Representative Miller Meeks.
Thank you so much, Chair Takano, and thank you to all of the witnesses. Last year, Congress increased funding for the Vet Tech pilot program from $15 million a year to $45 million a year to allow for more eligible veterans to participate. This is a program that provides veterans with an opportunity to use GI-style benefits to participate in short-term training jobs in the IT industry. The program has been extremely successful. We know that most recent data as of March 1st, 2022, that total applications received were 60,527. Certificates of eligibility, 40,412. Total participants from FY19 to the present have been 5,566. Total graduated, 3,721 for an 87% graduation rate. There were 569 who withdrew after the start of the term, presently attending 1,276. Meaningful employment not obtained is 739, but meaningful employment attained 19,002 for 72% employment rate, which to me is outstanding, with an average salary of 60,000 and change. This has been an extremely successful program in my eyes. I know veterans in my community appreciate the opportunity to participate, and I'm just wondering what feedback have you all received on the pilot program, and can you please identify any improvements that you think are needed to help more veterans access this program?
Thank you very much for that question, because it is an important program, but I would like to give this opportunity to my chairman of Veterans Employment and Education Commission, Jim Luxury.
Thank you, Commissioner. Also, thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Congresswoman, for that question, and also for your leadership on this particular issue. We, the American Legion, are encouraging and believe in expanding the training and education with the VA programs such as the Vet Tech and the VRAP, also pushing the Vets First job employment through the federal government. The best thing we can do is actually make the programs more visible with our service members. A lot of our service members are not aware of their benefits and entitlements. We need to do a better job, and when I say we, I'm talking the veteran service organizations, but also reaching out to the schools. We need to let them know what their benefits are. So expanding the programs, the sooner we can get them marketed, we can get them educated, which gives them decent employment, which also makes them worthy tax-paying citizens, donating money into the communities and also into the national economy. The other thing, the other piece of assistance that we are looking at is the extension of the sunset date, which is scheduled to expire December of this year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I want to also thank Representative Kai Kahale, who was instrumental in helping us push forward legislation to increase funding. We'll take it to heart about the marketing and the sunset dates as well. And I'm over time, so with that, Chair Takano, I yield back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Miller Meeks. I'm going to have to go back on what I said about moving to the next panel. We've got 3 more members. I'm delighted to recognize Senator Hassan for 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your flexibility. And good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for your service and for what you do for our veterans. Commander Dillard, I wanted to start with a question to you. As you mentioned in your testimony, the American Legion's Buddy Checks initiative is an important peer-to-peer effort in which volunteer veterans check in on their buddies who may need help, whether it be mental health resources or just the comfort of a phone call, knowing there's another veteran thinking about them and to connect to. I was glad to see the Senate pass bipartisan legislation that Senator Ernst and I sponsored together to build on these efforts by directing the VA to designate a National Buddy Check Week. Commander, can you please speak to how buddy checks, which are volunteer-led, would complement the VA's efforts to support veterans' mental health?
First of all, thank you for the question, but Senator Hansen, I do want to thank you for your leadership in getting that buddy check bill passed through the Senate. It's very important to us.
Thank you.
You know, we're veterans, and we'll call veterans. They don't have to be legionnaires.
Right.
They don't have to be a dues-paying legionnaire. We don't care. A veteran's a veteran, and they're our brothers and sisters in arms. This can help the VA in many ways on the health of those veterans that we've talked. I've heard so many. We don't have the time to talk about some of the good things I've heard as I've traveled the states. But when a veteran talks to a veteran, they open up more.
Yeah.
And we can promise them that we will always fight for those Second Amendments. There won't be a stigmatism about I'm not going for mental health. And that's a key. So we need to be there, and that helps the VA whenever they start working with that veteran. And we can detect if we sense some problems.
Right.
And so.
So, well, thank you for that. And I wanted to follow up with one other question, because every year 200,000 service members transition from military to civilian life. The majority are 18 to 34 years old, in that age range, which is also the age range for the highest veteran suicide rate. That's why I introduced bipartisan legislation to strengthen and make permanent Solid Start, which, as you know, is a VA initiative that aims to contact every veteran multiple times by phone in the first year after they leave active duty to check in and help connect them to the VA programs and benefits. I'm glad to have the continued support of the Legion for this bill. Can you speak to how early and consistent contact with veterans transitioning from military to civilian life is critical to their mental health and well-being?
Yes, Senator, it's very critical. In the first part, coming out of transition, you're in a different place.
Yeah.
And so the Solid Start program was a big step in contacting these veterans at their early stage of transitioning or out of the service, because now the VA can tell them of the health and benefits, the possibilities they may be able to get. I think that was a very, very good move on the VA.
Right.
And all to do the Solid Start, and I think it's 3 times within the first year.
Yeah.
If we had people, we could do it more.
Well, thank you. I'm over time. I appreciate the chair's flexibility. I just really appreciate the Legion's leadership on all of these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. I now would like to turn to Representative Mace for 3 minutes. Representative Mace? Can you hear me, Representative Mace? Nancy? Can you unmute? Representative Mace, we can't hear Representative Mace. How about, let me, Nancy, we can't hear you.
I'm having, getting one,
Here you are.
I need
Okay.
1 minute, Mr. Chairman. I'm having some technical difficulties with my
Okay,
computer. Hang on one
Representative Mace, we can hear you now. We can hear you now. Representative, we can hear you. Oh, is she going to reboot? Okay, she'll probably reboot. Representative Moore, are you prepared to?
Yes, Chairman Takano, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Very
Go ahead,
good, very
go ahead,
good.
Representative Moore.
First, let me say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly Commander Dillard for being here. And I appreciate everyone participating in these hearings. First question would be, you know, women veterans are some of the fastest growing segment of homeless veteran population that we have. What steps should Congress take to ensure that the needs of our homeless women veterans are being met?
Thank you very much for that question. And my director, Joe Sharp of Veterans Employment Education, he can answer that much better than myself. Joe?
I'd like to say thank you for that question. We've been very successful as far as bringing down the homeless problem. At one time, we had about 250,000 homeless veterans at any time, and now it's down to about 30 to 40. And a lot of that's been done by legislation that was passed by Congress, and also the VA HUD-VASH program. It's been highly successful. We definitely believe that that program should be expanded. It should definitely have some provisions for women veterans, since they're the highest group that's experiencing homelessness. And we definitely like to have permanent authorization of support and services for veterans and families program. Thank you.
Thank you. And kind of a follow-up, how can we in Congress improve the transition assistance program to better serve disabled veteran members and their transition from active to civil service?
The American Legion has always been for improving the TAP program. One of the things we've wanted to do is to ensure that before a veteran leaves the military, that they're gainfully employed, that there's a revenue source coming into that family before they leave and have to be on unemployment. Many of the programs that we currently have actually do what we've been looking for. The Skill Bridge program that DOD does that actually trains individuals, the programs with licensing certification really help veterans find employment prior to their departure. The VECTEC program is another program, again, that we're very proud of. We have about 10 million jobs that we can't fill because of high skill type employment, and jobs like the Skill Bridge program that we'd like to see expanded, and the VECTEC we also want to see expanded do exactly that. We've always been for gainful employment, and when you start seeing service members being employed with salaries from $60,000 to $140,000, that's the perfect thing for individuals who are gainfully employed. They're able to take care of themselves, their families, and contribute to their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I am out of time. I will yield back.
Thank you, Representative Moore. I'm going to call an end to this first panel and excuse our panelists. Thank you so much to the American Legion for all you do for our veterans, the voice that you provide. It's indeed a pleasure to see you all again. I know I spent some time with you all in Phoenix, and very much appreciate all that you do for veterans. You're a very special voice that that is instrumental and essential in moving this place, the Capitol, to do the right thing and to keep our promises. So with that, I'm going to excuse this panel, and I want to come down, make sure I shake all your hands before you go, and then we'll reset the table for the next panel. 5-minute recess. I now reconvene the Joint Committee for the testimony of our second panel, testimony and our questioning. But before I recognize our second panel, I'd like to acknowledge Jan Thompson, who is the president of the American Defenders of Bataan and Corregidor Memorial Society, the ADBC-MS. This year is the 80th anniversary of the U.S. battles of World War II. The American Defender of Bataan and Corregidor Memorial Society represent an important voice for this history and the ongoing struggles to recognize those who sacrificed so much, including the POWs of these battles. So, Ms. Thompson, if you are, will be joining us, I think, through, there you are, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Thompson, I'd like to recognize you. I know you were a guest of Senator Tester, who's not here with us, but I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to provide some testimony to us. You're welcome. Can we hear, Ms. Thompson, can you say something so we want to test the system?
Yes.
Okay,
Good morning, everyone.
We do hear you, so go ahead.
Thank you. So this is, okay. So Chairman Tester and Takano, ranking members Moran and Vost, and members of the Senate and Veterans Affairs Committee, thank you for inviting me to speak about the American POWs of the Empire of Japan during World War II. We honor these American men and women as the heroes who deserve recognition by Congress and America as a whole. They have largely been forgotten, and we must remedy this. I represent the American Defenders of Bataan and Corregidor Memorial Society, and I am the daughter of one of those POWs. The ADBC Memorial Society represents the men and women who defended American territories and allies in the Pacific, such as Guam, Wake, Midway, Java, the Philippines, and the Marianas. Within the first 6 months of the war, by June 1942, the majority became prisoners of war. Our mission is to preserve the history of the American POW experience in the Pacific and to teach future generations of the POW's sacrifice, courage, determination, and faith, as this is the essence of the American spirit. Like today's Ukrainians, the Americans in the Pacific were fighting a formidable invader. The Empire of Japan also had far superior equipment and armed forces. Although Guam fell within days of Pearl Harbor, the Marines and civilians on Wake Island held out for a legendary 2 weeks. And the American and Filipino defenders in the Philippines repelled the Japanese army for nearly 5 months. They fought with outdated weapons, lack of medicines, ammunition, and supplies. Help did not come from the United States. The men on the Bataan Peninsula were surrendered 80 years ago next month. Those surrendered on Bataan endured what is now known as the Bataan Death March. And as Senator Tester said in his opening remarks, this April 9th marks the 80th anniversary of the Bataan Death March. Less than 1 month later, on May 6th, the island of Corregidor was surrendered. And the rest of the American and Filipino units scattered throughout the 7,000 islands of the Philippines soon followed. Some of you know about the horrors of the Bataan Death March, but few of you know about the beheading of Wake Island Marines, or the machine gunning of American sailors who survived the sinking of the USS Houston, or the deadly imprisonment in Japan of the indigenous people of Attu from Alaska. To survive the surrender was just one hurdle, because each day of the POW's captivity, 3.5 years, was a constant struggle for survival. All the POWs, American and Allied, were starved, denied medical care, refused clothing, routinely beaten, and murdered. Some POWs became human experiments. Some aviators were executed, followed by a ritualistic eating of their livers, and others without reason, such as on Wake and Palawan, were simply massacred. As the war progressed, the majority of the POWs were shipped throughout the empire on what are called hell ships to be slave laborers for private Japanese companies. All of these hell ships were unmarked, and many were sunk by American bombers or submarines. Thousands of American POWs died by friendly fire. For those who survived captivity, returning home presented another battle, some POWs were forced to sign gag orders about the horrors they experienced. Many of them could not articulate what had happened to them or what they had witnessed. And it took a very long time for the Veterans Administration to recognize they all had returned home with a disability. The sacrifice and resilience of the American POWs of Japan, especially in light of today's events, should not be forgotten. Their courage continues to inspire. To this end, in this year of the 80th anniversaries, I request that Congress immediately approve an accurate and inclusive Congressional Gold Medal for America's early defenders of the Pacific who fell to Japan. They are the most diverse World War II cohort to be considered for the Congressional Gold Medal. The US-Japan alliance is very strong today, and we ask Congress to encourage the Japanese in the following: to institutionalize the reconciliation program that was started in 2010 with the ADBC Memorial Society. The current POW Japan Friendship Program should be expanded. Japan's UNESCO sites need to acknowledge POW slave labor, and a world-class memorial should be installed at the port of Moji, where most POWs entered Japan on the hell ships. The epic battles of Bataan and Caregivers were a symbol of hope and a beacon of our future success. This should not be forgotten. It is time to honor these men and women. And thank you for listening and inviting me today.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, for that, for your testimony. I'll ask my staff to brief me on the status of the legislation that you have brought up. Let me just say that I too believe this history is so important, and the sacrifice of our World War II veterans in the Pacific, and specifically those that served, those that endured the hell ships and those that endured the Bataan Death March. We must remember their sacrifice. We must face up to history. No matter how terrible it is, we must encourage our ally Japan to do that. We must live up to those ideals for ourselves as well, to face our own history. So thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I will now recognize our witnesses for our second panel for their opening statements. First, we have Charlie Brown, National President of the Paralyzed Veterans of America, or PVA. You are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, and members of the committee, I am honored to have this opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of tens of thousands of veterans with spinal cord injuries and disorders who depend heavily on the benefits and health care available through the Department of Veterans Affairs. This week, PVA members from our 33 chapters will be meeting virtually with members of Congress to strongly advocate for the legislation that is crucial to their ongoing health and independence. My written testimony includes a full list of PVA's 2022 priorities. In the interest of time, I would like to focus on three critically important issues that Congress must address: improved access to specialty systems of care, expanded access to the home and community-based services, or HCBS, and increased access to benefits that promote the health, safety, and independence of catastrophically disabled veterans. First, PVA firmly believes the VA is the best care for veterans with catastrophic disabilities. Their spinal cord injury and disorder, or SCID, system of care provides a coordinated lifelong continuum of services for paralyzed veterans. There is no comparable private system. As a result, we are deeply concerned by the reports recently that the VA intends to recommend a part of the asset and infrastructure review process the closure or the consolidation of some of the SCID centers. We believe the services must be maintained in line with the accurate assessment of available resources and the true needs of veterans with SCID. In the meantime, we are concerned about VA's current workforce crisis. Although ongoing has been made more difficult by the pandemic, PVA estimates there is a shortage of several hundred nurses in the SEID system of care, which limits bed availability for admission into the SEID centers, reducing access for specialty care delivery. We urge Congress to pass the RAISE Act to help VA address staffing concerns and fulfill its mission to care for veterans. We also call on Congress to pass the MAMMO Act. Mammography services are critical to ensuring the health of our women veterans who see an increased prevalence of breast cancer compared to the civilian counterparts. However, as many PVA women can attest, not all screening devices, whether in the VA or in the community, are accessible for wheelchair users. No woman veteran should have less than full access to care, especially simply because they're in a wheelchair or have a disability. The second issue I'd like to address is the improved access to the Hcbs. I, along with many of my fellow PVA members, live independently, but depend upon the services of a caregiver to help us live our basic activities of daily living, such as getting out of bed, dressing, and taking care of our basic bodily needs. One Saturday morning this past fall, I was informed late that I would not be receiving the home care that I desperately needed. At that point in time, I realized it would be between 25 or more hours before I would receive my next nursing services. I wouldn't be able to eat. I wouldn't be able to drink. I wouldn't be able to take medications. I would be stuck in bed without any services. Thankfully, through the process of making many phone calls, I was able to regain some help, and someone was able to come to my home and help me. When I contacted my social worker at the VA offices on the next available opportunity, I was informed that it was my duty to have backup. It wasn't the duty of the services. For me, when I sustained my SEID during my military service, I knew that there would be significant barriers and challenges, but I never dreamed that I would literally be abandoned by the system that was supposed to support me and my fellow veterans. No veteran should ever be able to face this situation. That's why PVA gives its strongest endorsement for the recently introduced Elizabeth Dole Home and Community-Based Services for Veterans and Caregivers Act. This critically important legislation would make urgently needed improvements to the VA Hcbs, including expanding the Veterans Directed Care Program to all VA medical centers, creating pilot programs to address direct care worker shortages, and increasing access to respite care. We urge Congress to pass this bipartisan legislation. Finally, we need Congress to pass pending legislation that would increase access to the benefits that promote the health, safety, and independence of paralyzed veterans. I want to highlight legislation that would increase access to adapted vehicles for catastrophically disabled veterans. VA provides one automobile grant during a lifetime. The current grant pays for almost 1/2 or to 1/3 of the cost of the vehicle to be adapted. A safe, accessible vehicle is not a luxury for wheelchair users who often encounter barriers in accessing transportation, including air travel, among other Americans. We urge you to pass either the Auto for Veterans Act or the Cars for Veterans Act this year. Thank you again for the opportunity to share our views and our ongoing commitment to paralyzed veterans and their caregivers. I would be happy to answer questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Without objection, your written testimony in full will be included in the hearing record. Next, we'll hear from Jared Lyon, National President and CEO at the Student Veterans of America, or SVA. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Tester, Takano, ranking members Moran and Bost, and members of the committees. Thank you for allowing Student Veterans of America to testify on our legislative priorities for the 2022 legislative calendar. With more than 1,500 on-campus chapters, Student Veterans of America is committed to the empowerment of yesterday's warriors. Through a supportive network of chapter leaders, SVA works to transform the skills and experience of student veterans to ensure that they achieve their greatest potential. In my statement today, I'll briefly discuss some of the most pressing issues that we hear from student veterans and our chapters. We encourage the committees to review our written testimony for a comprehensive list of our policy priorities. In my remarks today and the ones that follow, I'll focus on our 4 policy issues of special importance to SVA in 2022. First is the permanent emergency protections for VA education benefits. As we look to a future beyond the pandemic, it's clear that VA needs broader, permanent authority to proactively protect student veterans' benefits during national emergencies. These committees saw firsthand the gravity of the situation facing tens of thousands of student veterans and their families as the pandemic unfolded in earnest back in March of 2020. The sheer amount of work that was involved to identify holes in VA's support system, craft legislative solutions, and push them through Congress cannot be overstated. While we're grateful for the committee's work in making this happen, let's ensure that we don't have to repeat this arduous task. We strongly encourage these committees to learn from our shared history and make the temporary protections a permanent authority at VA to ensure adequate protections are available for the next emergency. Second, access to VA health care for student veterans. Student veterans' access to VA education benefits is of critical importance, but the needs of student veterans do extend beyond education benefits, and one of those needs is health care. Military service, especially with the recent end to the 20-year war in Afghanistan, can weigh heavily on the minds of student veterans. According to the Journal of American College Health, student veterans are more likely than their peers to experience mental health challenges. But these data demonstrate that if treatment is available to student veterans, they are more likely to seek out and receive treatment. SVA believes that Congress should take steps to ensure that mental health resources are available to student veterans where they are, on campus. An oft-overlooked program is VA's Veteran Integration to Academic Leadership, or VITAL program. VITAL is a joint effort between the Veterans Health Administration and the Veterans Benefits Administration that provides on-campus mental health and support services to student veterans when and where they need it, and coordinates with VHA, VBA, and community care providers. In addition, VITAL provides education and training on student veteran-specific needs for campus faculty and staff to further aid colleges in creating a more welcoming and inclusive community for veterans transitioning out of the military. When viewed in light of VA's whole health treatment objective, VITAL's broad portfolio of services stands out as a well-designed, flexible, and responsive to the day-to-day needs of student veterans. SVA supports expansion of the VITAL program and its capabilities on campuses across the country through increases in annual funding and proper prioritization within VA. SVA has received valuable feedback from student veterans in recent years about how VA can continue to modernize the VA work-study program. One issue that is raised regularly is substantial disparity in opportunities available through VA work-study compared to traditional work-study currently available to non-veteran peers. VA work-study students are largely required to work in roles directly related to VA. This limits greatly participants' ability to learn and develop the skill sets they need to enter the broader workforce upon graduation. As part of our ongoing VFW SVA Legislative Fellowship, we are working with fellow PhD student and Air Force veteran John Randolph of Penn State University to recommend important changes to the VA work-study system. Specifically, John proposes broadening the pool of qualifying work-study opportunities and improving payment rate and structure. We hope to work with these committees to examine further expansion of the VA work-study programs. Fourth is childcare. Childcare needs to be another area that we focus on, as it is a pressure point for many student veterans. Increasing access to childcare is a near universal conversation among SVA chapters, and it is no surprise that given more than 50% of student veterans themselves are parents. Childcare challenges create added pressures for the veterans and post-traditional students that can complicate academic journeys. Finally, I'd like to briefly address two additional issues. SVA remains committed to increasing certain monthly housing allowance rates, or MHA, including that of exclusively online learners. We look forward to working with the committees to address this issue. Second, SVA strongly supports Guard and Reserve GI Bill parity. We thank Chairman Levin for championing the House-passed Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, and we encourage the Senate to pass this bill swiftly. And today, on International Women's Day, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge our sisters in arms, who make up nearly half of all SVA chapter leaders nationwide. SVA appreciates the committee's commitment to acting on these issues, which directly support student veterans and their needs. And in doing so, you are ensuring we truly meet the need of all those who have borne the battle. By addressing them, you are ensuring our country delivers on the promise we made to every veteran the day they chose to serve. That service to our country would not just be rewarding on its own, but would leave veterans better off than when they joined. Thank you for your time and attention and devotion to the cause of veterans in higher education. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon, for your testimony. Without objection, your full written testimony will be included in the hearing record. We will now hear next from I'm jumping a little bit out over here, but Renee Campos, Commander Ray Campos, Senior Director, Government Relations for Veterans Wounded Warrior Care at Military Officers of America. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tesser and Takano, ranking members Moran and Boss, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to share MOA's priorities. We commend the committees and VA for pressing hard in 2021 to support veterans, service members, and their families during a difficult year in the fight against the pandemic. I'd like to highlight two concerning trends. First is unpredictable funding. MOA, like the IB VSOs, is concerned about how ongoing crises and threats could dramatically alter VA's mission and funding. Congress must establish a path for predictable funding so VA can meet its modernization mandates. Equally concerning is VA's ability to execute the massive volume of legislation enacted in recent years while dealing with ongoing systemic problems. The Secretary is further challenged by not having an Undersecretary for Health and Benefits. MOA urges Congress and the administration to expedite the process to fill these critical positions. Turning to healthcare, stabilizing, modernizing VHA's workforce and support systems is crucial. One member wrote MOA with thoughts of dropping his care a year being at the VA in Monterey, California, saying, "At first, VA seemed like a good system, but I've since learned it's not user-friendly and difficult to navigate. I've tried working with the patient advocate, but she couldn't do much. Like so many VA employees, she left." We urge Congress to support the Secretary's Human Infrastructure Plan to include permanent authority for expediting hiring and onboarding of staff and increasing pay. For long-term care and extended care, VA recently announced its plan to establish more caregiving programs and geriatric and extended care facilities by 2026. However, we believe more immediate actions are needed. MOA supports the Elizabeth Dole Home and Community-Based Services for Veterans and Caregivers Act, and we urge funding and passage of this comprehensive legislation. There's also a need for dedicated funding to expand 3 newer and hugely popular programs. That's the medical foster homes and veterans-directed care programs. Next, MOA thanks VA for its commitment to supporting women, minority, and underserved veterans, but it is woefully behind in collecting quality data on race, ethnicity, and gender, and must take corrective action immediately across the enterprise. MOA recommends VA and Congress accelerate its efforts to eliminate disparities to ensure equitable delivery of health care and benefits across all veteran populations. We also appreciate Congress and VA prioritizing mental health and suicide prevention, but veterans are still struggling to schedule appointments. MOA's Texas Council of Chapters experience sums up this challenge. Veterans are getting the runaround in obtaining referrals to community care providers. Many have PTSD and can't get timely access to a mental health counselor at the VA or in the community. Others waited months for routine procedures like colonoscopies and shoulder surgeries. Congress must ensure VA continues executing enacted legislation and investing in mental health and suicide prevention services. In terms of benefits, the need for passing comprehensive toxic exposure reforms is urgent. Recognizing when toxic exposure has occurred allows veterans, healthcare providers, and researchers to proactively detect, monitor, and treat conditions earlier. MOA recommends Congress pass comprehensive toxic exposure reforms, which includes access to healthcare, reforms the presumptive process, and establishes presumptions for illnesses meeting the standard of positive association. Finally, in 2017, Congress took action to protect veterans with VA home loans, but signs of predatory behaviors are reemerging. MOA believes Congress should mandate regular reporting of data and consumer protection concerns on this benefit, and with the assistance of other federal agencies. In closing, we look forward to working with the committees and the VA to better the lives of those who serve this country faithfully. I thank you, and I stand by for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Campos, and I apologize for the technical difficulties we're having. You endured well under such stress, and but I will say that you performed admirably. Without objection, your full written testimony will be included in the hearing record. I now, let's see, something out of order here. Our next witness is Claire Manning Dick, Vice President at the Gold Star Wives of America. You are now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony, and you're doing it online. Ms. Manning Dick.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, Chairman Takano, and Ranking Member Bose. And distinguished committee members, we want to thank you for inviting us to testify this year. It has been our honor and privilege to work with legislators for over 77 years to better the lives of surviving spouses and families. Nananina Hunt, Akandonzi. My name is Claire Aka Manning Dick. I am the surviving spouse of Sergeant Richard Charles Dick, who served in the U.S. Air Force from 1964 to 68. Richard continued his life of service as a dedicated leader as our vice chairman for our Shoshone-Paiute tribes on the Duck Valley Indian Reservation. He fought during the Tet Offensive in South Vietnam, and he died in 2010 due to Agent Orange exposure. After being his caregiver, I am now the primary caregiver of his 98-year-old mother. I fought several battles protecting the Navajo Code Talkers. Later, my father served as a Marine assistant to Ira Hayes, the well-known Iwo Jima flag raiser. I am the granddaughter of a World War I veteran who served 6 campaigns in France. Native American veterans have a strong legacy of service to our country, and I am proud of my heritage and the dedication of our people to this great nation. Native American veterans who live on isolated reservations like I do understand all too well the pain and suffering of high rates of suicide, opioid and alcohol addictions, and limited health services. To receive services from a health specialist, we need to drive 300 miles round trip for the VA medical services or even civilian medical services. COVID was very devastating to our reservation, and many of our veterans were taken ill. Not having access to mental health services resulted in our reservation experiencing the highest rate of suicide we've seen in years. It is our hope that the VA will provide better outreach to veterans and their families on all reservations, especially those in remote areas, and to increase funding to all veteran clinics. When mental health services are unavailable and no diagnosis is made, benefits are not afforded to the family left behind due to suicide. GSW supports any effort to reduce the rate of service-connected deaths by suicide and to expedite the process for survivors to obtain the benefits they desperately need. Of course, an increase in compensation to all surviving spouses is the #1 goal for Gold Star Wives of America. Other than the cost of living raises, the DIC dependent and indemnity compensation has not had a raise since 1993, when the flat rate was created for all going forward. The flat rate is the equivalent of 43% of a 100% disabled veteran. We are asking for equity with surviving spouses of federal employees who receive 55%. We are also asking to authorize survivors of retirees to draw the full month retired pay for the month in which the retiree dies. Many of our members have been widowed due to the effects of Agent Orange. We are now dealing with the effects of exposure to burn pits and other toxic exposures. When healthy young people are sent to war and subsequently exposed to toxins, they should not have to prove their exposure or to wait for the science. It has already been 30 years since the first Gulf War, and we are still waiting for a true definition or clinical case of Gulf War syndrome. We hear from many of our survivor spouses under age 55 who are wanting to remarry and are hesitant as they are fearful to lose the benefits which they have been awarded. For 77 years, we have come to remind you to follow the words of Abraham Lincoln, to care for him who have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan. While our spouses paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country, we are the ones who proudly live out their sacrifice each and every day. Ubanidua, thank you again for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Manning-Dick, for your testimony. Without objection, your full written testimony will be included in the hearing record. I now recognize Brigadier General J. Roy Robinson, President of the National Guard Association of the United States. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony, General.
Thank you. Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Boss, and other distinguished members of the Senate and House committees. On behalf of the almost 45,000 members of NAUGUS and nearly 450,000 soldiers and airmen of the National Guard, we greatly appreciate this opportunity to share with you our thoughts on today's hearing topics for the record. Thank you for the support you have provided to ensure accountability and improve our nation's services to veterans and their families. Over the past several years, the combined efforts of your two committees have produced critical advances that have improved the lives of our National Guardsmen and women. And I'd like to personally thank each and every one of you for that hard work. From increased USERRA protections to VA home loan eligibility for National Guard Title 32 service, we continue to make progress on multiple fronts towards true parity between the active and reserve components. Today, I'd like to focus on three specific issues impacting Guardsmen that fall under the jurisdiction of this committee: the benefits of increased access to medical coverage, ensuring benefit parity for Guardsmen, and further strengthening the total force by finally creating a singular document of military service to replace the active duty-only DD-214. I'd like to discuss with the committee today providing zero-cost TRICARE health coverage to the National Guard and Reserve. Well, this is not an effort that I expect will be concluded this year. I believe very strongly that the time is now to discuss if an operational reserve is better served through ensuring guaranteed medical coverage in lieu of the current disjointed system of third-party health contractors and periodic health assessments. This year, NAUGUS will advocate for conducting a study at the Department of Defense into what the cost of such a change in policy would be. The benefits of zero-cost TRICARE coverage extend beyond medical readiness and well-being for reserve component military families. TRICARE, as one of our top retention policies, will help us keep a manned and ready force. In addition to building medical readiness today, providing preventive care throughout our service members' careers will likely reduce medical expenditures when they transition from drilling Guardsman to veteran. This will also become a significant employer benefit when a CEO or hiring manager knows a service member will not require health insurance coverage. As we ask more and more of our National Guard and Reserve units in peacetime training, I worry that companies will start to choose equally qualified non-military candidates over our service members simply because they are concerned that the soldier or airman will be away too often. We must find a better way to incentivize these companies. I ask each of you for your support on H.R. 3512, Healthcare for Our Troops Act. This groundbreaking bill will recreate how we provide preventative health care to the National Guard, and I'm convinced it will not only provide better health results to our service members, but will prove cost advantageous in the long run. One of the primary legislative goals of August is to address the benefit disparity for Guardsmen under federal activation authorities. For the past several years, I've addressed this committee and asked for your assistance in correcting numerous benefits not afforded to the thousands of Guard and Reserve service members deploying under Title 10, United States Code 12304B Bravo. With the passage of the Forever GI Bill and the fiscal year 2018 Defense Authorization Act, Guardsmen and Reservists are now eligible for nearly all the same benefits as their active duty counterparts, including tuition assistance, transitional health care, and post-9/11 GI Bill benefits. Of major concern for the National Guard is creating full parity for Guard service in relation to earning the post-9/11 GI Bill benefit. Guardsmen currently serve in a variety of statuses and missions that do not accrue the same GI Bill benefits as their active duty counterparts. Unlike our active counter component peers, a day in the National Guard or Reserve does not always equal 1 day of service. Regular weekend training days and annual training days do not count towards benefits. Federal deployments abroad have decreased, making it much more difficult for Reserve component service members to earn federal benefits, including the GI Bill. Examples of this distortion in eligibility have been particularly acute in the past several years of increased domestic mobilization. Much of the COVID responses to civil disturbance, and disaster relief have not granted GI Bill eligibility. Lastly, I'd like to discuss the need for a single record of military service across all components and services. If the Department of Defense truly wants to achieve its long-stated goal of total force, then a cumulative document recording all military service, active duty, and reserve component is critical. The fact that the active duty, Guard, and Reserve all have different documents to describe military service is both unnecessary and cumbersome. Thank you.
Thank you, General Robinson. Your written testimony in full will be included in the hearing record without objection. Our next witness is Major Bonnie Carroll, President and founder at the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors Incorporated. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Tester and Decano, ranking members Moran and Bost, and distinguished committee members, on behalf of the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the families of America's fallen heroes. Since TAPS was founded in 1994, we provided care and support to more than 100,000 bereaved military family members of all ages, representing all services and all manners of death. In 2021 alone, 9,246 newly bereaved survivors came to TAPS for care. Of those, 27% were grieving the death of a military loved one to suicide, and 31% to illness loss. More than 16,500 surviving family members whose military loved ones died due to an illness are now receiving support from TAPS. Sadly, we project this number to increase by more than 3,000 this year. As a result of these increasing losses and the challenges they pose for grieving loved ones, many of whom were caregivers for their veteran without recognition or government support for years before their death, TAPS is committed to promoting a deeper understanding of the illnesses that may result from exposures to environmental toxins. As a leading voice for these impacted families, TAPS is grateful to the chairman and ranking members for crafting comprehensive toxic exposure legislation. The Cost of War Act and the Honoring Our Pact Act will ensure 3.5 million veterans exposed to toxins receive critical health care, and their surviving families will have access to all available benefits earned through the service of their loved one. We thank the House for passing the PACT Act last week and the Senate for passing the Health Care for Burn Pit Veterans Act, the first step in a three-phased approach for delivering health care and benefits to veterans exposed to environmental toxins. and fulfilling our nation's sacred obligation to care for our veterans and for their survivors. From our decades of experience, we have learned that families grieving a suicide loss often cope with symptoms of trauma and complicated grief, putting them at increased risk for suicide themselves, for post-traumatic stress, and other mental health concerns due to the traumatic nature of their loss. Providing critical bereavement support to help mitigate suicide survivors' risk is imperative. We appreciate Representative Rouser and Senator Tillis sponsoring the Expanding the Families of Veterans Access to Mental Health Services Act, which provides VA Vet Center counseling and mental health services to surviving families of veteran suicide loss who are currently ineligible to access these life-saving services. We thank Chairman Takano for introducing the Strong Veterans Act of 2022, which includes hiring an additional 100 full-time equivalent employees at VA vet centers to provide expanded mental health care to veterans, service members, their families, and their survivors. TAPS also proudly endorses the Gold Star Families Day Act and thanks Senators Warren and Ernst for their support. This important legislation, supported by 35 veteran service organizations to include Gold Star Wives and American Gold Star Mothers, will create a federal holiday to recognize and honor the sacrifices made by the families of all those who stepped forward to serve in defense of freedom and who died while serving or as a result of their service. TAPS remains committed to improving dependency and indemnity compensation for surviving families. We are grateful to Chairman Tester and Senator Boozman for Congresswoman Hayes for introducing the Caring for Survivors Act of 2021 to strengthen DIC and provide equity with other federal survivor benefits. TAPS is also working with Congress to introduce comprehensive legislation to allow surviving spouses to retain their benefits upon remarriage. Under current law, typically young widows who tragically lose their spouse in the military lose survivor benefits if they remarry before the age of 55. Many survivors from illness loss, suicide, as well as combat are younger than 55 and often have children who they must now raise alone. These surviving spouses, therefore, do not remarry after the death of their service member because the loss of these financial benefits would negatively impact their family, an additional unfair burden on them. And I would be remiss if I did not express our support today for the surviving families in Ukraine and to our sister organization, TAPS Ukraine. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our families today.
Thank you, Major Carroll, for your testimony. Without objection, your written testimony in full will be included in the hearing record. Finally, we'll hear from Jennifer Dane, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director for the Modern Military Association of America. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Bost, and the members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Dane, I'm an Air Force veteran. Founded in 1993, the Modern Military Association is the nation's largest lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer military and veteran nonprofit advocating for fairness and equality. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Our community has served honorably since the Revolutionary War, but we have largely been left out of the narrative. However, over the course of American history, our past and our current existence, especially in Texas and Florida, is laden with discrimination and vast harm. Most recently with the implementation of the transgender service ban and Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was repealed in 2011. Those two harms harmed hundreds of thousands of veterans and family members, indirectly and directly. I personally was investigated under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and know that there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not reminded that without equality and fairness, my service is seen lesser than my straight counterparts. Since then, the fight for equality and justice has never ceased. We are incredibly honored to fully support Chairman Takano's commission on examining the harms of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We also applaud VA Secretary McDonough's taking steps to restore veteran benefits for other than honorable discharges, many of which were from Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and he also displayed the pride flag honorably. However, this is not enough. Currently, the VA, DoD, and DHS do not collect standardized data and research on our over 1 million veterans, even with the consent of these veterans. Without critical information, health disparities will continue and concerns will only be exacerbated. Instead of providing cost-effective and timely preventative care for these veterans, informed by research and analysis, you all, Congress, are costing American taxpayers millions of dollars. Congress must eliminate the red tape that surrounds approval for research and analysis for our communities. And we know this capability does exist. And we've been working with Cerner to make sure that the electronic health records management system is fully implemented. We know how critical it is to our communities. It is 20 years in the making, and it's critical that the success continues. We applaud VA for hiring executives from DHA and ensuring the leadership that allows this enterprise to make timely decisions, which we know saves lives. This platform will allow for the successful transition from the DoD to VA. Next, we urge Congress to establish an internal task force within the VA that is vital to meet the needs of our communities and provide funding to establish a full-time LGBTQ care coordinator. To date, there is zero fully funded LGBTQ care coordinators that exist. This includes also providing standardized cultural competency training to understand the vast differences and experiences of our LGBTQ military and veteran community, which our organization did create and is the only training program to do so, called Rainbow Shield. We did that to address these urgent needs to fill the gaps. Lastly, we urge Congress to fully examine the family building program that works and operates within the VA. For a veteran to receive this service, a service connection disability must be established for those wanting to conceive. If a veteran meets those criteria, they must be married and be able to provide sperm or an egg, which one could assume this means to receive that benefit, you must be in a married heterosexual relationship. It leaves our veterans out that are single, partnered, and married to someone of the same sex. So with that, we want to really emphasize the fact that our LGBTQ veterans are left out of the narrative many times. We know that this implementation of this electronic health records management system will change the way that our veterans are seen by collecting data. So before we can address some of these issues like homelessness or burn pit exposure for our communities, we know that the data and research must exist. So unlike these other VSOs that are up here that have done this for years, we are just asking for simple data to know what our community needs. Because if we really want to address all veterans, this community must be seen, heard, and known that they are existent in today's society. And with that, again, thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, and ranking members Morin and Bost, and the distinguished members of the committee. I heed for questions and comments.
Thank you, Ms. Dane. Without objection, your written testimony in full will be included in the hearing record. I'm going to, since we have only three members and no members, 3 members present and no members on the online platform, I'm going to extend questioning time to 5 minutes each. I'll begin with myself. I'll recognize myself. I'd like to start with a question for any of the panelists. As I mentioned earlier in the hearing, the PACT Act establishes a process at VA for consideration of new potential presumptions, which with concrete decision-making timelines at each step of the process. The bill also creates greater opportunity for public input into which conditions VA is considering for inclusion. Could any of the panel or a few of the panel describe the importance of VSO input into the presumptive determination process? So we have that's what we try to do in the bill. Major Carol, I see you smiling. You want to begin?
No, thank you, sir. I just appreciate this very much. We learn so much from our surviving families, the illnesses that their loved ones suffered, the journey that they took to get medical care, find that diagnosis, and then service connect it back to deployments and exposures. What you're doing to open this up and really understand what families are facing and the burden this has placed on our service members is tremendous, and I am so very grateful to you. This is critically important.
Thank you. Any other panelists? Ms. Campos?
Yes, sir. I appreciate that question. We have found over the years in our organization, like many of my colleagues here, that the best legislation is made when you have a collective, inclusive group of people working together to craft the legislation as it moves forward. We've seen from history with, even with these committees in working appeals modernization, we have a collective coalition of people working on toxic exposure. And, again, we have come so far that it is important to be inclusive in this process, and we ask that both the committees work together. I know we will work together to do whatever we can to get comprehensive legislation across the line this year. And, we don't have any other choice. We need to do it now.
Thank you, Ms. Campos. Mr. Brown, I see you nodding your head.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. I'll just say that no one works in a vacuum, and working with the VSOs together, I think we can make a strong impact in getting this passed now. It's beyond time. It's happened for a long time, so I thank you, sir, for that opportunity.
Anybody else wish to weigh in on this question? Well, thank you for that testimony. One of the goals of the PACT Act is to shift the burden of proof of service connection in favor of the veteran. Can someone please describe for me the current difficulty that veterans face when filing disability claims at VA, particularly when the claim is contingent upon access to service records that are decades old and may not contain all of the relevant information about the veteran's service and potential exposure? Any comment about that? Ms. Campos?
Well, I can speak from our members and also from those folks that, including myself, that have gone through the disability process. I'm not sure it's changed a great deal. It's very complex, and if a veteran doesn't get, before they're even leaving active duty, if they don't get the assistance, they're fighting a system all the way. So I think that, it's so important that the veteran have, what they need. Some folks leaving service have to get their own medical records. In other words, we make it too hard for people to serve, and how we treat them on the other side of the DT 214 is important. And if we don't value their service on that side and help them through that process, which is not a simple process, it's time-consuming and also very difficult to even talk to somebody through the process. So it is critical that we, veterans have, somebody to help them navigate the system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are also to anyone on the panel. You know, the January veteran unemployment rates are, thank heaven, about 3.8%, which is actually better than the national average. However, this was down from an 11.8% in April of 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic. What employment programs have you seen that have been most effective at getting our veterans back to work, and what can Congress do to keep these numbers as low as possible?
Sir, I'm happy to take that question. So, when we look at student veterans throughout the United States and their family members who are in school, they're attending school with one of the best reemployment programs that exists. It is the GI Bill. One of the areas that the pandemic shed particular light on, even though the unemployment numbers are low at the moment, is the fact that just over half of all student veterans who are using the GI Bill and in school right now are working full or part-time while they're in school. And so it can't be overstated enough that as we think through job programs that work, to encourage employers to actually reach out to today's student veterans on campuses in their communities where they have open jobs. And if we can try to match better the employment opportunities for student veterans with what they're actually majoring in. Unfortunately, while they're in school, they tend to work in retail or service jobs, yet their top 3 majors for this population are business, science, technology, engineering, and math, and health-related fields. And often that second transition after graduating college and joining the workforce can be made more difficult when you don't have working experience in the industry that you've majored in. So encouraging folks to reach out from an employment perspective to those working adults who are back in school, today's student veterans. Thank you, sir.
Any of you been watching closely our Vet Tech program and the success of the Vet Tech program? And comment on the success of it. I know that it is one of the highest actually placement ones that are out there. And then the next question on a follow-up on that is, are you concerned right now we're seeing that it's beginning to run out of funds, and do you feel that that's something that should be pushed to the front and taken care of very quickly to make sure a program like that continues?
Sir, I don't mind jumping in again here. Vet Tech came to being when Forever GI Bill became a reality in 2017. And each year that the pilot program has been available, it's run out of funds quicker than the demand for the program. When we think of education and training in the broadest sense, the majority of GI Bill users are actually attending post-secondary education. They're achieving their degrees. So programs like Vet Tech actually reach out to those veterans who potentially are not planning to go to college and are looking for education and training opportunities beyond the traditional degree. I think in an ever-shifting economy, as we look to make sure that veterans remain competitive as a workforce, programs like Vet Tech should be prioritized with their ability to make sure that they're properly funded to meet demand for today's veterans.
Thank you. So I want to shift to a question here. 1 in 4 female veterans report sexual harassment by male veterans on the VA grounds. This is a horrible fact, but VSOs are uniquely placed to be part of ending the sexual harassment at the VA. How can your organizations partner with the VA and other VSOs to educate veterans and staff on the role in ending sexual harassment at the VA? Anybody?
I can speak to that as a person. I'm a woman that uses the VA facilities. I'm also a MST survivor in service. And I think this is a great question to ask. One we don't have an answer to, but I think as the time progresses and more training, not only with the employees, but also our fellow veterans, I think especially our older VSOs need to, strategically talk about what it really means to talk to younger veterans, especially our younger, any female veteran for that matter, because some would consider talking to me like, "Hi, sweetheart," as sexual harassment, which is definitely the case. Sometimes there is more of a case of that, but just really knowing that this isn't the old VA you used to know. There's so many different diverse perspectives, and I think that the VA is doing a really good job with its staff and training. And I think the veterans are the ones, that need to really come together and learn how to, talk to one another in ways. And I mean, it's also a reason why that there is specialized, a women's veteran clinic. So there's safety. It's also, for LGBTQ folks too, we also want to be protected too. So it's not just for women veterans, it's for those that are different from the veteran portfolio of a white male veteran. It's if we're different than that, I mean, I feel like there's got to be more education and training for VSOs that have that as their demographic, and maybe just exposure and bringing us together. Because I believe at the crux of it, we're stronger together, and exposure to a certain perspective is the best way to solve those problems. Not directly to your question, but indirectly of how we can co-opt that conversation and do it in a way that's more meaningful and that has lasting impacts.
Thank you for your answer. My time's expired, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I recognize Senator Blumenthal for 5 minutes. Senator?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the focus on toxic burn pits, subject of intense interest to me, as well as other kinds of contaminants on the battlefield or here at home. Camp Lejeune and Hawaii are good examples of how exposure to those contaminants can cause lasting severe injury and pain and affliction to our veterans. I want to focus on an issue where a number of you have been very supportive. I want to cite particularly the Paralyzed Veterans of America, the disabled veterans, disabled American veterans, and the veterans of foreign wars, which have issued a statement in support of my work on emergency care reimbursements. In the comprehensive independent budget fiscal years 2023 and 2024 for the Department of Veterans Affairs, PVA compiled, along with those other organizations, the DAV and the VFW, a written statement on this issue, noting that you, quote, continue to note that VA must begin fully implementing the Wolf versus Wilkie court ruling, end quote. The statement in the budget comes as a reminder that the VA has work to do in light of your having shared nearly identical recommendation last year. That work is really overdue. The statement goes on to endorse the legislation that I have offered to, quote, mandate VA to begin processing and reimbursing veterans for emergency care. As you well know, the VA's wrongful denial and refusal to process many thousands of outstanding emergency care reimbursements owed to veterans who receive care at non-VA facilities is continuing to occur despite 2 judicial decisions compelling the VA to pay veterans back, which the VA is again appealing in the courtroom. I was proud to introduce the Veterans Emergency Care Reimbursement Act of 2021. I introduced it last year. I'm currently working on a letter to Secretary McDonough, who is very aware of my position on this issue again. Mr. Brown, would you please describe your feeling, and I presume it's feeling of frustration, because of this ongoing legal battle, and what your expectation would be, what your message is to the VA today?
Well, PVA strongly believes that the Wolf versus Wilkie court decision must be implemented. I can speak on behalf of specifically one of my friends and members of PVA, was taken to an emergency hospital for an injury. Upon getting released from the hospital and going home, he submitted the bills to be paid. They're more than, I believe he's more than over half a year now, and they still haven't been paid by the VA. That's severely affected his personal credit limits and things like that. And it's beyond incomprehensible why the VA won't cover those things, because there was no facility near him, and the emergency basis he needed to be taken care of. And as the VA says before, that this is what we cover. We will cover these bills, but now they don't. So we do expect the VA to move forward. We're encouraging them to do so. We just think they need to move faster than they already are. And it's harmful to the veterans in just more than, it's a mental aspect also too. It just doesn't wear down your home, your value at home, but it also wears down your mental abilities. So we strongly encourage the VA to move forward on this in a faster effort.
Thank you. As you point out, its impact is devastating, not only financially, possibly physically, but also emotionally. And I would just urge the VA to respond to your very eloquent call. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. I now recognize Health Subcommittee Chair Representative Brownlee. Chairwoman Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all the panelists for being here and what you do every single day for our nation's veterans. Mr. Brown, I wanted to thank you too for recognizing two of my bills, the MAMO bill, which we continue to work on, and the recently introduced bill, the Elizabeth Dole Community-Based Services for Veterans and Caregivers Act of 2022. So, Mr. Brown, if you could just elaborate a little bit why you think expanding home and community-based services for elderly and disabled veterans is important.
Well, thank you for the question. This one actually hits home on me also. My sister was my caregiver for 22 years. Unfortunately, about 2 years ago, I lost the ability for her to work for me because I couldn't pay her. She had to get a job outside, which is why I fell back on the community care system. So it does hit home. It's important to keep our dignity, keep our family. You're healthier when you're at home than you are in a community care system. So I'll just say that's why it's important to me.
Well, thank you for that, and I really do. I really appreciate your support and your own personal story around that. And I think, I introduced this because I think so many of our veterans, both disabled veterans and veterans who are aging, all want to be taken care of at home if they are able to, and not be in any kind of institutionalized care. So I will look forward to working with you on that bill as we move forward. And Commander Campos, thank you for mentioning the Elizabeth Dole bill as well. I think probably for the members that you represent, you're representing more of the elderly and less the disabled. So if you could speak a little bit to its importance.
Well, this, as I said in our testimony, this is, and I think COVID's kind of hit home a lot more, the need for having this. Many of the veteran and military service organizations here and those that we work with in the Military Coalition, we've been working to try to get VA to move forward quicker to meet the needs of an elderly population. But again, we also have people leaving service who have been wounded, ill, or injured, not only because of wars, but just in service as a whole. And these veterans want to live as independently as possible. And VA, while I recognized in our testimony, grateful that they are moving forward, expanding extended care and long-term care, and planning over the next few years, there are other things that need to happen more quickly that are popular, like the Veterans Directed Care program I mentioned. I can speak personally too for my brother who I lost last year. And that foster home care would have been very good. It's something he wanted, but he wasn't eligible for, so this bill is, we're very grateful that it's something that is timely and long overdue, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Commander, and thank you for sharing your story with regards to your brother. I only have a few seconds left. Commander Campos, you also mentioned in your written testimony the importance of another bill that I introduced, the Dental Care for Veterans Act. Can you speak a little bit to that and, kind of let us know, how many of your veterans, this seems to be a constant issue and problem for them?
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that question. I think like mental health, we've started the dialogue of saying that mental health is physical health, and that's together. I think you have to look at that in terms of dental health as well. We have supported your bill as well as Senator Sanders, and we believe strongly that dental health and considering the comorbidities that so many veterans in the VA have, that you can't take care of the physical without also taking care of the mental as well as the the dental side of their care. And again, that affects other parts of their quality of life and their well-being.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brownlee. Ranking Member Rosendale, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And I really enjoy seeing all of our VSOs here in the meeting live. It's great to have you here joining us, really. And thank you so much for all your advocacy for the veterans. We really do appreciate that. Mr. Brown, I don't have a question for you, but I really appreciate your statement on a number of benefits that the Veterans Administration seems to offer back out and declare that they will cover, and then to actually rescind that at the last moment when the veteran really relies upon it. And I, for one, sure recognize the just the unpredictability and the havoc that creates in a veteran's life, not to mention the other veterans that look at that circumstance and say, well, why in the world would I want to get involved in an operation like that can't run itself properly? So thank you very much for that input. Which brings me to the question that I want to go to Mr. Lyon about. The previous panel that we had here, I was talking to them about this change in interpretation, not a change in law, not a change in statute, but a change in interpretation and the 8515 recognition for our students to be able to get education benefits from the VA. And I was wondering if you had any of your members already run into this, because apparently it's starting to roll out, or could you expound upon what we could anticipate this fall if this isn't sorted out?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. And, generally speaking, with the issue that you're bringing up, there's certainly big areas of concern. I think chief among them is certainly as it pertains to institutional compliance and the way in which VA is interpreting and presenting guidance. I mean, I think ultimately, regardless of how many folks are impacted, and there certainly are, the VA guidance is kind of paramount. And just taking your interest, we'd love to work with you and your team to have a better opportunity to have greater sort of clarity and communication from VA relative to this new change in interpretation.
I really appreciate that. And we're trying right now to apply pressure on the VA to clarify and basically just to return to the interpretation that they had been using for 60 years. I mean, going back to the GI Bill to make sure that the students were able to get that benefit that they were promised when they actually enlisted. That's where we're supposed to be. Which brings me to my next question, which is for you, General Roy. We talk to a lot of service members, veterans and active, in regards to the recognition of duty, okay, to identify benefits. And I, for one, we 10% of the population of Montana is veterans. So we are very, very concerned about these issues. And what I've also seen is the amount of reliance that the military has placed upon the National Guard to supplement all of their additional activities. Unfortunately, we've been involved in a lot of conflicts as of recent, and it's been very placed a lot of pressure on the National Guard to help fill those voids. But the other conversation that everyone has is we have to be careful about the diminishing return on this investment, if you will, to make sure that we don't place the benefit level so high on the National Guard that we start drawing the enlistment, the incentive to enlist in traditional or full active duty. And so I just would love to hear some feedback from you on this.
Yes, sir, that's a great question. But I would ask you to look at it from a little bit different perspective. If you look at the men and women who join the active component of any of the services, their average service is going to be between 4 and 6 years. Very few of those service members are going to go on to receive a full retirement and stay in for 20 to 30 years. So what it does is it makes the Guard and Reserve a very attractive option when they opt out of active service. When they leave active service, they want to move back to Montana and they want to continue to serve in a uniform. We want to make it very attractive for the Guard and Reserve to be a great option for them to come in and fill those ranks and continue to serve. And if you think about everything that's involved in the cost associated with training service members throughout all the services, we want to retain that to the best extent possible. And the percent of those who come and serve in the reserve components, National Guard and Reserve, they stay longer, and a much greater percentage of them actually qualify for retirement benefits, all the way at a reduced rate. So there's actually some goodness in trying to make the Guard and Reserve a more attractive place to go.
And if, in fact, they had already served in full active military.
Correct.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, my time is up. I would yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I learned something from that exchange, so thank you for that question. Representative Pappas, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our panelists here today for some very compelling testimony and for your service and all your advocacy work that I think is really important to our committee moving forward. So I appreciate that. I wanted to start with Brigadier General Robinson, and I appreciate your comments about zero-cost TRICARE, about full parity for members of the Guard and Reserve. I see this through the members of the New Hampshire National Guard that I come into contact with, who I know are continuously being called upon during times of national emergency and crises in New Hampshire. But we know they aren't always credited for those activations as they should be. I wanted to highlight a bill that I'm introducing later this week. It's a companion bill to a bill that's in the Senate, the Record of Military Service for Members of the Armed Forces Act. It's going to ensure that all members of the reserve components are provided the same DD-214 as other members of the armed forces following their retirement or completion of service. And so I know that you alluded to this in your testimony. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the importance of a standardized form and what this would do for members of the Guard and Reserve.
Thank you for your question. We're working on this right now. So just think about the difficulty in those who have served providing documentation to the VA for any type of service after they take the uniform off. If they've served in multiple services or multiple components, then it's a matter of going around and gathering up different documents to include the DD-214 from their active service, NGB Form 22 from their reserve service or from their Guard reservist service. So the idea that we could someday have one document that captured all the service of a service member without regard to the service component or the actual component that they do the service in, or the geographic location where they do the service, either domestic or overseas, could be captured on one document that at some point in time could possibly be electronic, and it would be there for a very long period of time, as opposed to the service members going around or their families when the need arises to prove that service, going around and trying to collect these documents from several different repositories across the country. So we think it would be a really good move for for those in the National Guard who try to document their service with the form that all don't understand. But I also think it would be very positive for those who serve in multiple services and in multiple components, and the challenge of gathering and documenting that service. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments and for highlighting why this is important, and look forward to continuing to work with you on this issue and hopefully building some significant momentum in the Congress to pass this really common sense piece of legislation. With my remaining time, I wanted to turn to Ms. Dane. I know that we're more than a decade now after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but we know that there are LGBTQ veterans who are still denied benefits and services, who have been, caught up in everything in the legacy really of that era. Last September, the VA took steps to remove barriers facing those veterans who are still unable to access benefits, but clearly we need to establish protections in law, which is why I've got a bill called the SERV Act that looks to make permanent access to VA benefits outlined by the Secretary. I want to thank your association and your leadership on this issue, and just wondering if you had any additional comments on steps we need to take to ensure that LGBTQ veterans are treated fairly and also feel comfortable receiving the care that they need through VA.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. We know that since World War II until the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2011, 144,000 service members were discharged as honorably or other than honorable simply for being a lesbian, gay, or bisexual. We know that only or less than 1% of those benefits have been restored. So it's critical that these veterans are seen and visible and get the honor and dignity that they deserve, and especially having their benefits restored. Our organization this past 2 years have worked with over probably about 500 service members trying to get those appeals and the benefits given back from them from the Board of Records Correction. To date, I've only seen one of those upgraded. One upgrade for petitioning the Board of Records Correction. We also, because of the pandemic, it exacerbated the wait time to actually get them. We saw members of our community die because they didn't have access to health care. And whenever they did die, they couldn't have access to their burial benefits. So what do I have to tell families? I'm so sorry. Your family member served with dignity and respect, and we can appreciate that. But the VA says your duty or your service is not valid. So we urge that the SERV Act be absolutely implemented, and we urge the VA to do this immediately without any hesitation, because we do need to restore dignity and honor to those service members who served our country, and they are our American heroes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. I'm over my time, but I do want to say that it's long past the time to right the wrongs of our history, especially when it comes to this group of veterans. So thank you for your comments. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Pappas. I now recognize Representative Ruiz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. It took over 2 decades since our 9/11 veterans began to serve, but the House has finally passed a historic comprehensive bill that will help veterans suffering from exposure to burn pits and other toxins. Last week, House members from both sides of the aisle came together and agreed that our veterans should not have to shoulder the burden to prove their illnesses are a result of their service to our country and exposure to toxic burn pit smoke. Now, it is the Senate's turn to act. While I understand the Senate has already passed a bill that would allow veterans an extra 5 years to apply for health care, it doesn't address the key problem, and it is missing the most important key element in order to truly help veterans harmed from toxic exposures: presumptions. Military studies based on the Gulf War on the health effects of open air waste burning can be traced back to the 1990s, when concerns about health risks began to rise from returning Gulf War veterans. Yet many continue to argue that more studies and reviews are needed before we can prove our veterans' illnesses are related to their service. As a physician and public health expert, I understand the necessities for studies and the importance of understanding the science behind an illness and disease, but that has been done here. The evidence has shown us time and time again that there is a connection between illnesses veterans are diagnosed with and their service near burn pits. Otherwise, healthy veterans with no increased risk factors are becoming delayed casualties of war when years later they develop respiratory illnesses and cancers. We don't need more studies to understand why. Carcinogens cause cancer. Breathing noxious chemicals cause lung injury. Burn pits, toxic smoke contains toxic chemicals that harm lungs and carcinogens that cause cancer. We need to follow the evidence and presume service connection for all 23 illnesses listed in the Honoring Our Pact Act, which I call on my Senate colleagues to pass immediately. Our veterans cannot wait longer to get the health care that we own them. My first question, Claire Manning-Dick, thank you so much and all the Gold Star Wives of America for your commitment to bring awareness to the inequities that exist and benefits for surviving spouses and children. As mentioned in your statement, the Gold Star Wives of America supports the Honoring Our Pact Act, which includes my bill, the Presumptive Benefits for Warfighters Exposed to Burn Pits and Other Toxins Act. Can you tell us why it is important to pass legislation that includes a presumption of service connection for illnesses and cancers?
Yes, it is so important. This is just desperately needed with all of the, just going back to my husband, how hard it was for him, you know, to prove that he was exposed to toxic exposure. And it took years and years to, because we were denied several times. But now you're looking at the burn pits and the things that the families are going through, the, especially I can speak for like the isolated areas, you know, because we live so far out on the reservations, and we're not receiving a lot of the outreach and the services that we really need to get. And we need to have a better connection with the VA. The VA really needs to do a better outreach consistent of doing the paperwork and the studies and the science, you know, of the toxic exposure. And this is just something that's a long time coming, and I'm just so proud of you to have this, you know, encouragement. It's just a long time coming, and we are really supporting anything that you, you know, push.
It seems to me, ma'am, that simply extending the time that veterans can apply for their health care doesn't solve the problem of the burden still on the veteran and having to fight the VA to prove that their service-related cancer and chronic bronchiolitis and other lung injuries are due to burn pits. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, definitely. That is correct. Yes.
So would you say that the presumption and taking that burden off the shoulders of the veterans is the key element in addressing burn pits for our veterans today?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. I've got a hard stop at 1:30, but Ranking Member Bost, if you'd like to take 5 minutes, please go ahead.
Only to thank our witnesses for being here and thanking them for the hard work that they do on every day for each one of their groups, organizations, and the veterans that they serve. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I too, in my closing, wish to thank all of the witnesses here today for, I know, the incredible work that you do. We've worked with each of you on legislation. Some of that legislation I know is already past the 50 goal line. As I say, I think with respect to the Parity Act, we are within field goal range, but we're not going to settle for 3 points. We're going to go for, the touchdown, and as I say, the 2-point conversion. So, and that's true also for the PACT Act and everything else that we've got, that we've put through the House, and we've got Ms. Brownlee's legislation that's pending. I mean, we got a lot of folks, a lot of people, both sides of the aisle that want to move stuff. It's going to be my ambition, it is my ambition, that we have a banner of a year for veterans under my watch. So, but it only going to happen, it only happens with you and your members and your advocacy, and we take our priorities from you. So, so thank you for all the work you do. And with that, the joint committee hearing is now adjourned.